Frog the Jam. Yu-Gi-Oh's history with translation has been a rocky one. In the early days, you'll get cards like Hinotama or Raigeki, where the card would use Japanese equivalents for names that in Japanese are given English names. Hinotama in Japan is just called Fireball. Ryukushin is Gargoyle, Raigeki is Thunderbolt. This could also lead to things like Giant Trunade being named after a thing that doesn't exist because they miswrote the Romanji version of Tornado. These are mostly fine and have no effect on gameplay. Heck, for cases like Trunade, it makes it sound more fantastical. Like this is a level above a tornado or a hurricane, it's a Trunade! One thing that did end up becoming a problem, though, was when these translations had gameplay implications. What I'm talking about are cards like Summoned Skull. In Japan, Summoned Skull was called Summoned Daemon, which means that when Archfiends, which is what Daemon was translated to, became an archetype in the pack Dark Crisis, any effect that included them would include Summoned Skull. The issue, though, is that while that would be true in Japan, for Americans that wouldn't work, since Summoned Skull didn't have Archfiend in its name. Once the problem was realized, later reprints of Summoned Skull would include the line of text saying, "This card is always treated as an Archfiend card." This is a really odd solution, putting Skull in a strange position of being a normal monster with an effect that isn't an effect. I mean, you can't negate his name. Or wait, maybe you can. Other cards whose translated names aged poorly include Harpy's Brother, Cyberstein, and Diffusion Wave Motion. When the Harpy, Cyber, and Fusion archetypes were established, these guys were big problems, since they don't count due to not having those words in their original Japanese names. While Harpy's Brother was simply renamed to Sky Scout, Cyberstein and Diffusion Wave Motion were given tags like Summoned Skull that said they were not invited to the cookout and do not have the pass. The most famous of all of these monsters, though, is without a question Frog the Jam. Frog the Jam was released back in 1999 in the premium pack at, and sit down for this, Ultra Rare, and was named Keru Suraimu, translating to Frog Slime. When the Frog archetype properly started, this presented a problem, as Frog the Jam was not a part of it and would therefore break the rules. But this card is called Keru in Japan, and Keru means frog, right? Well, you'd be right, except for the fact that the proper frog archetype doesn't use Keru, it uses Geru. Both are ways to say frog, but where frogs like Dupe Frog and Swap Frog use Geru, Frog the Jam uses Keru. Long story short, this guy sits at his own lily pad. Frog the Jam was both a huge problem, but also too insignificant to give attention to, as he was only ever printed once in a McDonald's promo pack. Despite that, every piece of Frog support released until 2016 had to specify that it worked with all Frog monsters, except Frog the Jam. You can add one Frog monster, except Frog the Jam. Banish one Frog, except Frog the Jam. And with how much Frogs were played, this made people super confused as to why the card needed to be removed if it was never going to see play regardless. In 2016, ironically because of the release of a card that itself isn't a frog, totally awesome, Konami finally decided to kill the joke and reprint Jam with its new name of Slime Toad. Other cards like Hardened Armed Dragon and Elemental Valkyrie have had similar treatments, but none of them have had such a prolific history like Frog the Jam. Anti-Drug PSA. This is going to sound crazy, but that's only because it is. The early 2000s was at the tail end of the war on drugs in America, a war we lost even though we were the only ones in it. We were past the days of cartoon all-stars to the rescue and Mario telling us we're going to hell. We were gearing up to tackle obesity next, so who cares what Ed, Ed, and Eddie are smoking? One of the last major anti-drug campaigns that used cartoons as the spokespeople was with Yu-Gi-Oh! As a part of the My Anti-Drug campaign in 2003. The idea with this campaign was that instead of giving kids a general idea of why not to use drugs, they would instead focus on something personal to them, like family, their friends, or a sports team, and make that the reason to not use drugs. As far as messaging goes, it's a pretty good idea, and to make it happen, the Office of National Drug Control Policy would team up with the three usual suspects: 4Kids, Blockbuster, and Sandy Lion Stickers. The boys are back in town! Sandy Lion Stickers would produce stickers using the Yu-Gi-Oh! Characters with anti-drug messaging, which would then be sold in Blockbusters. Seeing what each character had as their reason to not do drugs is pretty great. Joey does it for his sister, Yugi does it for honor, Kaiba does it because he likes winning, and Pegasus does it for power. I guess if the reason you need to stay off drugs is world domination, well hell, he's doing what we asked. This would also extend into Yu-Gi-Oh's online presence, as going to the Yu-Gi-Oh website in 2003 would let you watch an exclusive animation about the dangers of weed.
I know marijuana is harmful. I know it can't improve my game. My friends and I have faced many battles, and we have always dueled without drugs. I wouldn't be the world's best duelist if I smoked marijuana. It would disappoint my friends and lower my concentration. And losing control with drugs is one duel I don't want to have. I must stay healthy and keep my friends close if I want to defeat my opponent's monsters. I will never dishonor myself or my friends by using drugs. That's playing a game I can't win. Honor. My anti-drug.
So much to love here. Special attention to the fact they had key art for Yugi and Joey, but not Tristan and Taya, so quickly had to draft these two up in paint before lunch. The promotion unfortunately didn't go much further than this. Whether it was the plan to make it this short, or it wasn't very popular, hard to say. And nowadays the campaign is all but forgotten, save for that animation being shared around every once in a while. And a Yu-Gi-Oh player never did drugs again. The Next Zoodiac. The impact of Zoodiacs in Raging Tempest can't be overstated no matter how hard you try. Immediately, we're talking within the week of their printing immediately, Zoodiac bulldozed the entire game. The combination of their extreme ease of use, absurd power, and versatility meant that at YCS Seattle, the first event where Zoodiac was playable, 25 out of the top 32 players were on Zoodiac. The deck was insanely consistent, able to use any one of its monsters to get into any one of its Xyz monsters. Had no problems breaking boards due to the power of its main boss monster, Zoodiac Trident. It was instantly recognized as the best deck Yu-Gi-Oh had ever seen. What made Zoodiacs even more deadly was their incredible splashability. With only a few main deck and extra deck slots dedicated to Zoodiac monsters, the deck could fit in its best pieces into anything and give whatever it wanted a major boost. From the Metal Foes and their pendulum summons, to the Infernoids and their graveyard setup, to the most infamous team-up, the Kaijus, replacing anything with a worthless kaiju that would get blown apart by Zoodiac Trident. Independently, each of those decks was already performing impressively, but adding Zoodiac on top of that made them way stronger. Zoodiac's destruction tour continued as YCS Atlanta, Guatemala, and Prague would all either be swamped by Zoodiac or won by them outright. If you tallied up the top cuts of all 4 of these events, you would have 112 available slots to fill. Zoodiac took up 92 of those 112 slots. When Banlist season came around, any hit to this deck would have to be from a baseball bat to slow it down. And post-Banlist Zoodiac got even better. Before they even got their new support in the next pack, they took 29 of the top 32 spots at YCS Denver, and 12 of the top 16 spots at YCS Bogota post-Banlist. The next set, Maximum Crisis, would come out and introduce even more Zoodiacs, more Zoo variants like True Draco, and Zoo would just keep getting better and better. It wasn't until Konami got out the heavy-duty weaponry and hit Broadbull, Trident, and Ratpierre that the deck finally stopped. To this day, the Zoodiac deck is so strong that just the release of Trident off the list, with nothing else, was enough to make Zoo a viable deck again after it mixed itself with the Tri-Brigade cards. Now that we've talked about Zoodiac, though, what does the entry itself mean? The Next Zoodiac? Well, Zoodiac's power left Yu-Gi-Oh! Players with a twitch. We'd been smacked so hard that now we were on high alert. The Next Zoodiac refers to a phenomenon in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where the player base will often overvalue a deck upon reveal and proclaim that its power is comparable to Zoodiac's. This is often followed by a swift and immediate flop. The term was coined by Yugi-tuber Lithium2300 when talking about the Magical Musket deck, saying the deck's consistency, power level, and potential made it a successor to Zoodiac as the best deck in the game. What made this sting all the more was how not only was Magical Musketeer not that good, it wasn't even good, period. Thanks to this tag of being the Next Zoodiac, Magical Musket is considered one of the biggest flops in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, due to the community being convinced it was about to kick the door down, only to end up stubbing its toe. As an aside, I have a personal hatred for the Magical Musketeers after I got into an argument with somebody claiming Magical Musketeer Max, their Link monster, was a better card than Predaplant Verte Anaconda. Not only is this card not better than Verte Anaconda, it's not even the best Link 1 trap-themed monster from the pack of its release. It's just a worse Trap Trick Sarah. Now, not every deck that got the Next Zoodiac treatment was as colossal a miss as Magical Muskets were. Decks like Orcust and Sky Striker were said to be on Zoodiac's level, and while they were certainly top strategies, the tag of the Next Zoodiac was not warranted. And even more so, doesn't have a solid definition. Do you mean it's the Next Zoodiac in terms of power? In terms of representation? In terms of its versatility? Other decks had those, but nobody had it to quite the extent the Zoodiacs did. Eventually we actually got it right when Tier Element was called the Next Zoodiac, and well, they were right. For my money, no deck got hit worse by the Zoodiac curse than Fluwanderees, a deck of level 1 bird monsters who gave you a load of additional normal summons instead of special summons. I don't know why this happened, but when Flu was revealed, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community went into meltdown. People were calling for the end times because of the birds, with one infamous comment saying that Flu was so strong, they needed to invent a tier above Tier 0 for how much play this deck was going to see. Like this deck was going to be the only thing we ever played with for the rest of time. It was fine. Expansive Storylines. Card storylines are one of Yu-Gi-Oh's strongest aspects. Creating lore intertwined through card art and effect gives players an incentive to check out newer packs to see if Skull Servant finally got to go on vacation. But usually storylines like this will be limited to a single series or archetype. Every now and again you'll get a case like S-Force, which involves decks like Psy-Frame, Time Thieves, and Evil Twins, but this is hardly as complicated as it gets. For that, you need what are loosely called expansive card storylines. These are stories that take place not just over several archetypes, but often entire cycles of card pack releases, usually taking years to play out properly. The very first example of an expansive card storyline is the Duel Terminal. Originating from the arcade machines of the same name, the Duel Terminal is a realm of 4 tribes in constant conflict. The sedentary Ice Barriers, the mercenary band X-Sabers, the reclusive Mist Valleys, and warlike Flamvels are trapped in a never-ending war, until one day a threat from outer space unites them. A meteorite from the W Nebula arrives on Earth and unleashes the Worm Menace, as they begin a full-scale invasion of the planet, forcing the disparate tribes to join forces, eventually constructing the weapons of war, the Allies of Justice. By building the ultimate decisive armor, the Allies are able to fight back against the worms, only for their war to awaken another dormant tribe, the Fables. These devils begin to encroach on the surface until they get blown up by a giant rock falling on them. Don't worry guys, happens to the best of us. Eventually getting sick and tired of all of this, the Ice Barriers unseal the 3 legendary dragons, causing an ice age and setting the world back to 0. This is the ending to the very first part of the storyline, which would go on for a later 2 sagas. The storyline would span dozens of archetypes, from all the ones mentioned above to the Naturia, trying to defend their home and sacred tree, which it turns out is actually housing a computer program meant to reset the world if things ever get too crazy, which becomes the Cleefort, who are then destroyed and release Infernoids, which resurrect a destruction god named Tiara. There's the Gishkis, remnants of the Ice Barrier who specialize in water magic, who have their own subplot going into the conflict within a family as a mother descends into madness and eventually starts mutating herself and her children with forbidden magic. When the Fables are killed, they release an ancient virus, which at first manifests itself as the bug-like Steel Swarm, before evolving further into the Evil Swarm virus, which resurrects dozens of previously killed characters into disgusting mutated masses. Then there's just trying to keep track of how many times Gem Knight Diamond dies. Would you guess these two are meant to be the same character? It was Yu-Gi-Oh's first attempt at a storyline like this, so it's very unfocused and hard to make sense of if you start from the beginning, especially if you don't dip into the guidebooks to get a clearer picture of what's going on. But when looking at what comes after it, it's one of the most important storylines in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Next was the World Legacy series, following a plucky band of RPG analogs, Aurum, Ib, Ningirsu, and Imduk, living under the control of the Mech Knights, and fighting for their lives against the hive mind Crawlers. One day, they find a special chalice, one of the 7 artifacts needed to save the world, and along with their new ally, Lee the Fairy, the 4 of them get upgraded and set out to defeat the Mech Knights and eliminate the Crawlers. The Mech Knights kidnap their cleric Ebe and reveal they're actually not evil after all, which Lee sees as a great chance to reveal she was evil the entire time, steals Ibe's body, and then mutates the Mech Knights into monstrosities. The only Mech Knight who escaped, Blue Sky, gives up his life to empower Aurum into Avram, as Ningirsu has to fight back against all of the mutated nightmares at the same time. The 3 remaining World Chalice members are able to fight back against the Nightmares and then fight Ibli, the new combined form of Ib and Lee, only for Ib to get control back long enough to kill herself. From there, the remaining fighters fracture, as Avram and Imduk create the justice-seeking Crusadia, and in an attempt to resurrect his now dead sister, Ningirsu creates the cold and mechanical Orcust, eventually bringing the 2 former friends back into conflict, as Lee plans in the background for her own resurrection. The storyline is so much easier to follow than the previous, thanks to its truncated length, lasting only 1 series of cards rather than 3. World Legacy was a massive step in the right direction, showing that Konami, when they had the resources and knowledge of how to do it, could create a really engaging card storyline. The very next one, though, overshadowed both of these and is considered the crown jewel of Yu-Gi-Oh's storytelling potential, the Branded storyline. Starting with a war between the Dogmatica Church and Tri-Brigade, which are mystical forest creatures ravaged by the horrors of war, the young Saint Ecclesia spots a portal in the sky that a dragon falls out of. Except when she goes to investigate, she finds a young man that's been branded with a strange mark. The 2 try to escape from the war into the depths of the desert of Golconda, only to come into conflict with the Springans, living missiles fighting to defeat a massive serpent who's taken over their land, which Albaz and Ecclesia assist with. While the 2 recover, a new threat appears in the Dogmatica capital, the Despia. an invading force of demons led by a jester named Aluber. Aluber has the same power that Albaz does to transform into dragons, and begins corrupting the bodies of the other Dogmatica followers into abominations. When Albaz and Ecclesia find out what's going on, they set out to recruit the ancient Sword Soul fighters to help them take back the capital. This one I'm going to leave a bit more vague, since it's really worth experiencing for yourself. The story takes a lot of twists and turns that make it a really interesting read-through. By the end of the story, people were on the edge of their seats waiting to see what new factions would appear, how Albaz and Ecclesia's story would conclude, and what they could even do to stop Aluber. They even have a filler arc where one of the Springhans goes off to become the world champ. This storyline was so popular, they released a book in Japan that contains every single card released as a part of the storyline, as well as the lore written out for the very first time. There's a reason people are excited that Konami is turning this one into an anime series, and why they stopped being hyped when they saw the Sky Striker one. The next storyline was something very strange, as it was actually meant to run parallel to the Albaz story, and I think might have wrapped up before the Albaz one did. Vsauce Starfrost is the story of a man named Vsauce, whose emotions were stolen and scattered across different dimensions, infecting alternate versions of himself with his worst aspects. Now he has to confront them all and absorb them back into himself to become one again. I don't know what it is about Vsauce, but nobody cared about this storyline. Maybe it's because he gave us Tearlament and Kashtira back to back, like a cat gives you a decapitated mouse, but whatever hype there was for Branded was not there for Vsauce. It eventually ends with the guy responsible for his suffering, Veda Upanishad, reappearing, restarting time, and then we do the whole thing over again. Am I selling it short? Maybe, but a much more interesting storyline was right around the corner. The Diabellstar lore is our latest one, which just wrapped up, and follows the Dark Witch Diabellstar on her hunt for the Sinful Spoils, a collection of dangerous artifacts. The first one she finds is the Snake Eye, which manifests itself into various creatures like Ash, Oak, and the massive Flamberge Dragon. She manages to subdue the eye and transform it into her new pet, Poplar. I would hate to leave out a pun this clever too. All of the Snake Eyes are level 1. And what do you call it when a pair of dice comes up with 2 1s? Snake Eyes. The story actually starts after this, when the main characters appear, the Badass Goblin Bikers. That is not a pseudonym, that's their name. And when they power up, they become the Kick-Ass Goblin Bikers. They don't do too well. Poplar, and by extension the Snake Eye, is then stolen by Diabellstar's old friend, Diabells the Original Sin Keeper, as the two are now in conflict as Diabells fights to get her pet back. This is another one I won't go too much into since it only just wrapped up, so it should be easy for you to get into, especially since it has goblins in it. These expansive card storylines have become a fan-favorite part of the game for the past 5 years, ever since PAX stopped having anime stories to draw from. And with a new one starting soon with Art Magia, it'll be interesting to see what happens to try to not make another Vsauce. Oh my god, I completely forgot about Draco Slayers. If you want to know the story, it's about Trident and friends trying to stop this guy. He is Hitler, if he was a dragon. Cards made by fans. Any kid who grew up playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Has tried making their own cards at some point. They all had infinite attack, were divine, and had Goku in the art. This was a coming-of-age ritual, don't act like you didn't do it! You'd dream of becoming a card designer, and then learn that Konami will fake your death so nobody will know your true identity, and then reevaluate. But there was actually a way for young players to live out their dreams and see their cards become a reality. Both the OCG and TCG have held tournaments for young fans to send in card designs to be turned into real cards. As soon as the very first Yu-Gi-Oh! Video game, Breed and Battle, fan designs have been used for the templates of cards, with the very first of them being Taihon. While its adapted version in the card game would eventually look much different from its Breed and Battle version, this was the first time a fan's design would be used for a monster. And by the release of the second Yu-Gi-Oh! Video game, Duel Monsters, there were 9 designs taken and used in the game that were submitted by fans. The most iconic, or I guess ironic of them, is the original twin long rods, which, like cards like Morpheon and Shape Snatch, have become fan favorites because of how ugly and weird they are. From here, about once a series, we'd get a fan contest that would result in some new cards, usually all lumped together in the same pack. GX is the outlier, as instead of printing all 3 cards that were accepted, 2 of them were used for designs exclusive to the anime. Again, though, in close proximity. The anime boss of the Monarch deck was Demiurge Emma, and alongside another monster named Load of Darkness, used almost right after Emma, were both made by fans, selected from a contest where 3 winners would get their cards printed. The last one was the only one of the 3 who actually got printed, Rallis the Starbird. I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, but if I wasn't the one of the 3 who got printed, I'd be pissed. The 5Ds contest did actually manage to print all the cards who won, with 5 in total making the cut. These included Splendid Rose, Morphtronic Vacuuman, Chaos King Archfiend, Bird of Roses, and, most surprisingly of all, Drill Synchron and Drill Warrior. Not only were these 2 much more important than being the Bird of Roses, since they would be used by the main character, they were also 2 of the Synchron and Warrior monsters who saw the most play. So, hats off to the kid who drew these. Especially because this picture of Drill Synchron is really funny to me. Zexal's contest wouldn't give us quite so many strong cards, as it went back down to 3. Giving us Bachi Bachi Bachi, Dote Dotengu, and Tatakawa Knight being released in Lords of the Tachyon Galaxy. You really had to drop the baby cards in the same set as the Dragon Rulers? You're about to learn, kids! Sometimes dreams shouldn't come true! Arc 5 was next, and because Arc 5 can't do anything right, they only included 1 fan-made card, Performapal Trump Witch. Vrains would have no fan-made cards because Vrains hates children. The TCG also got in on the fun and held a few contests itself to include some fan-made cards in upcoming packs, usually run through 4 kids in events like the Duel to Rule and Design Your Destiny sweepstakes. Duel to Rule gave its first prize winner a trip to the 2010 World Championship, a chance to duel a world champion, and the ability to design their own card on top of becoming the leader of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Nation. That event was won by a kid named Christopher, who was able to create his own card, Vampire Dragon. The Design Your Destiny sweepstakes was an art contest where kids could submit their designs to get them published in the pack Gladiator's Assault, and I am begging somebody to help me find this. There was an ad they did for this sweepstakes with Joey and Yugi, and Joey draws a monster riding a scooter, and then either Joey or Yugi says, "Monsters can't ride scooters." This stuck in my mind like I witnessed the Kennedy assassination, but I can't find it. The winners of this, well, actually, let's see if the playing field was fair. You have Tongue Twister, a cute little design. Screech, oh, very impressive shading, Kristen, good job. All right, now let's show off Dragon Ice. Adam, you f***ing cheater, you're a grown man, get out of here! Of course, if you want to talk about the most famous fan-made card, there's really only one. Tyler the Great Warrior. Hey, fair warning, this is gonna be a bit heavier than most. Not much fun to be found in childhood cancer, so let's just treat this right. Tyler Gressel was a 14-year-old kid in 2002, when he went to the doctors reporting intense abdominal pain. It turns out what was causing the pain was undifferentiated embryonal sarcoma, a form of cancer that typically appears in children between 5 and 15 and targets the liver. Tyler immediately went in for surgery, which resulted in the removal of 6 inches of his large intestine, 25% of his liver, and his entire gallbladder. If everything hadn't played out perfectly, there was no doubt that Tyler wouldn't have survived. But something beyond luck was helping out Tyler, since the doctor performing the surgery had actually seen one of the less than 20 cases before this and was able to remove the burst mass. During his recovery, the Make-A-Wish Foundation reached out to Tyler and his family, and for his wish, Tyler wanted to create his very own Yu-Gi-Oh card. In collaboration with 4Kids and Konami, they were able to make this happen. The initial sketches for Tyler's card were done by Tyler himself, before being sent to no less than Kazuki Takahashi himself, who, after translating the sketches into his own style, sent them back to Tyler for approval. The results are the card Tyler the Great Warrior, a one-of-a-kind card that represented Tyler's struggle, representing him as a Super Saiyan-style warrior with a sword, shurikens, and a black belt, with the unique pack code of TYL. Being a one-of-one makes Tyler the Great Warrior likely one of the rarest Yu-Gi-Oh cards in all of existence, as it was never reprinted or redistributed in any form. Konami doesn't even have a copy of it in their official card database. Only Tyler has it. That distinction as such a rare card proved to be a great thing for Tyler in 2023, when it came time to part with it. Since it was such a rare collector's item, Tyler made the call to sell the card in order to set himself up financially. The card would sell to a private collector on April 29th for a colossal $311,000, one of the highest sales in card game history, which Tyler put towards starting a family, business, and allowing his family to travel the world one day. It's one of the most unique stories in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, and for one that started in such a horrible, horrible place, having the ending we do have with Tyler alive and well is such an incredible thing. Upper Deck. Konami, despite being the creators of the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, were often hands-off for much of the American production of the property as we know it. You'll be familiar with how much they let 4Kids handle the production of the anime series, but that wasn't all. As for the lion's share of Yu-Gi-Oh's first decade, production of the cards wasn't handled by Konami, but Upper Deck Entertainment. Founded in 1988, Upper Deck was an American and Dutch company who specialized in sports card manufacturing, making cards for both the MLB and the NHL, as well as cards for shorter-lived TCGs like Avatar and World of Warcraft. The deal they made in 2002, though, to distribute Yu-Gi-Oh! Was their biggest non-sports deal ever, reaching record-high profits of over $17 million in the first quarter after the two joined forces. Upper Deck and Konami would work together in harmony for that near decade I mentioned earlier, organizing events like Shonen Jump World Championship Series, the precursor to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series, the first major organized play that Yu-Gi-Oh! Saw in America. Those couple of things wouldn't really make for an interesting entry on its own, though, so things started to get weird in the 5Ds era, specifically around the release of their second set, Crossroads of Chaos. Konami had been made aware of a product being sold by a company called Vintage Sports Cards. They were selling a product called Duel Kings 2, with official Konami branding, as well as Yu-Gi-Oh cards inside of it. If they were simply selling repackaged cards, that would be bad enough. Except they were found to be selling extremely high-quality counterfeit cards as well, not just cards gotten from packs that were produced by Upper Deck and Konami. These counterfeit cards were nearly indistinguishable from the real ones, only noticeable if looking at the Eye of Anubis stamp in the corner. First edition runs of cards would have a gold stamp, with unlimited runs having a silver stamp, though these were first edition runs with a silver stamp, meaning they were fakes. Konami went to sue Vintage Sports Cards, only for Vintage to divulge where these cards had come from. It turns out that on the sly, Upper Deck Entertainment had been producing and selling counterfeit cards in high and desirable rarities, in order to sell them to these resellers and make a load of profit all for themselves. Vintage Sports Cards disclosed that over 500,000 cards had been sold to them by Upper Deck. And now all of a sudden, this went from a case of Konami hunting down a reseller to them finding out that the people responsible for printing their flagship game had been scamming them the entire time. Upper Deck was added to the lawsuit that Vintage Sports Cards was a part of, with Upper Deck trying to calm things down by revealing a bomb strapped to their chest, saying that if Konami took things any further, they'd bankrupt both companies. They then tried to get Konami on breach of contract for trying to terminate their partnership following the discovery, and even went so far as to have the Netherlands branch sue the US branch to try to get a leg up. How that works, I have nowhere near the legal knowledge to tell you. The lawsuit continued into the production of the next pack, Crimson Crisis, as now it looked more and more likely that Konami could lose and end up halting production of the game. Crimson Crisis got delayed, sneak preview events for the pack were cancelled, and Upper Deck would hold a super sketchy tournament called Upper Deck Day, which was a way for them to drum up public support with extravagant prize cards as a way to dump said prize cards in case things went wrong. And wrong they did! Konami began winning case after case involving Upper Deck, with the few victories Upper Deck got being reversed, until the two companies settled out of court, with Konami leaving with an undisclosed amount of money, and Upper Deck leaving with a lifetime injunction, prohibiting them from ever producing Yu-Gi-Oh! Products ever again. As for Vintage Sports Cards, if they wanted me to find out what happened to them, they should have had a name that was easily searchable. From Duelist Revolution onward, Konami assumed full control of the brand and would distribute cards themselves. People refer to this event as the event that could have killed Yu-Gi-Oh!, and that's no understatement. With just a few different outcomes, Upper Deck's promise of mutually assured destruction would have come to pass. That delay in the release of Crimson Crisis could have proved fatal for Yu-Gi-Oh! Because card games like this require constant updates to keep their player base around. If Crimson Crisis had been delayed, players would have just found another game to play. It's not like Magic the Gathering and the Pokemon card game weren't doing just as well, if not better, around the same time. It wouldn't have been hard to make the transition. Upper Deck, for their part, haven't exactly kept their nose clean in a post-Konami landscape, found by the MLB to be doing a very similar thing they were doing to Konami to their baseball cards. Whether the more recent controversy of Upper Deck giving their employees exclusive cards meant to tank the secondary market is true or not, is just gonna have to come to pass. Unused 5D's intros. I miss when everything had its own website. I've already touched on how this affected me with Yu-Gi-Oh! And how I would absolutely abuse the refresh button on the official website to see when Bonds Beyond Time was coming out, check for when new packs were dropping, watch clips from episodes. It was the best. Same with sites like Nick Arcade and Cartoon Network. I honestly preferred when the internet was this sectored thing where every site had its purpose and intended age bracket. And now everybody just goes on Twitter and either sees a dead body or somebody's penis. I'd get really excited when these sites would start to do insight events, like polls or mock elections or announcements for new games. 4Kids would have one such event, and it's one that ended up having a huge impact on the latest series of the time, Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. 5Ds would premiere around 2008 or 2009 on 4Kids, but before it launched, they actually held a contest where kids could go to the 4Kids website and vote on 8 different theme songs for the show. We had never gotten a second theme song for any of the previous shows. Now we had a whole 8 of them to pick from. With them being just a little under a minute long each, I thought it would be fun to go through and do an impromptu top 8 list going over the best and worst of these themes, since it's clear why some got cut, but others sound really good.
They say it's not about winning, it's how you play the game. But if I'm not first, then I'm the worst, and there ain't no one else to blame.
You gotta be better than best.
Anything less, you're out of your league.
Gotta go faster.
can't catch what you can't see.
The difference between lying and winning.
One's for losers, but number one's for me.
Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. You say you will not be denied. Okay, you're one of the chosen five. Jack Atlas, the master of faster, wants to defeat, deplete. He wants to beat you. Duel Runner's gonna turbo duel. Come on, that's right, let's go. Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. The time has come now to break the rules. Come on, that's right, let's go. Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. You can lock me up, you can tie me down. Throw away the key. Still breaking out of this one-horse town. Yeah, you can't catch me. Revving up, driving hard. Put my faith in the cards. I got the need for speed.
Don't worry though, they knew they had gold, and reused this for a different 4Kids show, Go-Go Riki.
Bogo's such a blast, Chico's his best friend. Wooly does poetry. Rose is a princess to the end. Otto makes gadgetry. Daco's wise.
You think I have enough free time to make like this up?
To make you move. What you gonna do when the future's up to you? What you throw away will make me faster, make me better. Grab it up. To turn it around, turn it around. Grab it up. To turn it around, turn it around. So this time speed is power. And what you see as weakness makes us strong. Check it out, it's time to make your move. Never has a moment felt so right. No doubt, it's down to me and you. Moving faster than the speed of light. I can feel my engine pumping faster, faster. Raging with an appetite for turbo speed. Going fast makes me feel alive. My heart beats in hyperdrive. Do you think you can win on it if I lose? Just let destiny choose.
While the other songs, save for Need for Speed, were never used for anything else, they have been preserved and can be listened to via YouTube re-uploads. If you want to know what it would be like to live in a Butterfly Effect universe, imagine any of these actually being 5D's intro. Yu-Gi-Oh! Music to Duel by. Music has always been a really big part of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. In Japan, it's frequent to get a new opening every season, with some series ending up with 5 different theme songs, as opposed to America where we usually get just one. Not just the themes either, they'll often get incredibly high-quality music made for the show itself, some even being lyrical tracks. No doubt the most iconic is from Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, when the legendary Masaki Endo performed the song Clear Mind for the summoning of Shooting Star Dragon. And hey, he just did the opening for Perfect Origin Arc Season 2, I'm just saying! Even the games are no stranger to incredible music, with some legendary game composers like Hiroshi Tanabe and Wachiro Ozaki, who would go on to make music for the Metal Gear series, specifically Snake Eater, working on some of those Game Boy Advanced games. With how much attention the music is given in Japan, it naturally came with physical releases called Sound Duels. Sound Duels were simply CDs containing the soundtrack to a given Yu-Gi-Oh! Season, and they would include pretty much all the music they could. That begs the question, has America ever tried something like this? Well, once. Released on September 29th of 2001, Yu-Gi-Oh! Music to Duel By is a CD containing the soundtrack to the 4Kids dub of Yu-Gi-Oh! This was the first and only time the English soundtrack to a Yu-Gi-Oh! Series would ever be publicly released. Though it wasn't the only time 4Kids ever used that 4Kids Records label, as it was also how they released the soundtrack to Pokemon. Just like that Pokemon release, Music to Duel By has some instrumental pieces, compared to what the CD is now much more known for today, lyrical tracks. See, early 4Kids Yu-Gi-Oh! Had a lot of lyrical tracks. Moments like Kaiba hacking the Industrial Illusions satellite, or Joey and Yugi preparing for their duel, would be given theme songs like I'm Back and No Matter What. There were regular background tracks, including for moments like Exodia's summon or Blue Eyes coming out, but it's a lot less like the sound duels, which included loads of background music, and much closer to a regular CD with songs that were about Yu-Gi-Oh! Some of these are pretty good. No Matter What might be extremely corny, but it's not a bad song to listen to at all. But for everyone like that, you'll get a Duel Madness, or Face Up, Face Down, which is sung from Pegasus's perspective, by Pegasus voice actor and series voice director, Darren Dunstan. He wasn't the only 4Kids regular on the CD either, as a lot of other musicians who worked on this and other 4Kids productions would feature on the CD. Russell Velasquez, who made the themes to Sonic X and the Johto Pokemon seasons, would compose Time to Duel with Paul Blair, who would go on to become a longtime producer for Lady Gaga, working on Born This Way, Art Pop, and her movie A Star Is Born. It's a strong rumor that Music to Duel By was meant to be a test to see if the sound duel format could work in America, and whether by low sales or a change in approach, this would never happen again. That means official and even unofficial uploads of the majority of 4Kids background tracks are unavailable, beyond people trying to remove the audio of a scene to preserve just the music. Even a majority of the Duel Monsters OST is missing. Or at least it would be if not for Joel Doak. Joel was a composer on both Music to Duel By and a lot of the original series, and in 2009 would start uploading unreleased tracks from the series to his YouTube channel. Now if you want to listen to stuff like the theme of the God Cards or Kaiba's theme, you can thanks to Joel. The album itself has been preserved entirely online, and if sick curiosity gets the better of you, it's worth a listen. It's endearingly goofy, a monument to a time that's long past, and I wouldn't change a thing. Forbidden Memories. The very first official console Yu-Gi-Oh! Game, Forbidden Memories was released on December 9th, 1999 in Japan, and March 2002 in America for the original PlayStation. This is a game that coincides with both regions' launch of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game, with Japan's launch in February of 1999 and America's launch in March of 2002, both being accompanied by this game. The game itself is an updated, by 2 cards, upgrade of Dark Duel Stories 2 for the Game Boy, featuring a few of the same mechanics and characters made more extravagant for the PlayStation. The story of the game follows you as the Prince Atem, as you get usurped by the villain Haitian and trapped in your Millennium Puzzle, waking up years later in the care of Yugi, as now you have to get stronger so you can return to your own time and take back your kingdom. The game plays like Yu-Gi-Oh! In how Dark Duel Stories 2 kinda plays like Yu-Gi-Oh! It has all the monsters, but it has a variety of weird mechanics that even those who have played the game for years struggle to fully understand. For instance, fusion doesn't require polymerization and can be done with a variety of different monsters, like your entire hand if you choose. Monsters can be fused with other monsters and spell cards in a way that kind of has an internal logic to it, like using Elegant Egotist on a sword card to make the ritual Garma Sword Oath, or fusing Labyrinth Wall and Zone Eater to make Dungeon Worm. But then you have every other fusion in the game. Darkfire Dragon and Tiger Axe, I dare you to guess what they make. It doesn't get much easier when you get the monster on the field, as now you need to determine its star sign. You can align your monster with a different star based on the lunar bodies of our solar system, with each one having a strength and weakness that gives you an advantage, or disadvantage, over an opponent when in battle. This, along with the fusions, are some of the many things this game is infamous for, another being its crushing difficulty. The game is not coy, with the fact that it cheats. The game gives the opponent a randomized deck most of the time, meaning that there's little to no prep work you can do. And oftentimes, those decks will just give your opponent monsters leagues stronger than even those you can fuse into. Those fusions also have no catalog or explanation of how they work. If you find a way to fuse two monsters together successfully, you'd better write it down. Its grind is also excruciating, forcing you to play hundreds of games to afford single cards thanks to giving a max 5-star chips per game, with some cards costing in the thousands. It also has a nasty habit of giving opponents Exodia, which it'll randomly win with after dumping its whole hand, because drawing here works on rush duel rules. This has made the game a living hell for speedrunners.
No way!
Please play in defense.
No! I just got Exodia'd!
Nostalgia is a hell of a drug because I hated playing this game. It stinks. That said, I do still understand why people enjoy it so much. This is the original Yu-Gi-Oh game. Whichever one you grew up with, this one predates them all. So, I don't not understand why some people are willing to put up with the jank. Also, playing nothing like Yu-Gi-Oh kinda works to its advantage. There is absolutely nothing else quite like Forbidden Memories. For better or for worse, but for some people, that's all they need. If you want to play it, you can pick it up in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days collection. Trust me, it's in there. You can trust me. I'm a nice guy. I'm a good guy. You can trust me on this. Idiot. Duelist of the Roses. Released on September 6th, 2001 in Japan, just made it, and February 16th, 2003 in America, Duelist of the Roses might not seem it, but this is actually the sequel to Forbidden Memories. They might be unrelated in America, but in Japan, this game is called True Duel Monsters 2, while Forbidden Memories was True Duel Monsters 1. Instead of setting the game in ancient Egypt, this one is set in the English War of the Roses between Henry Tudor and Christian Rosencreuz, here played by Yugi and Kaiba. In the first scene you meet him in, Henry insists that his true name is boring and a pain to say, so instead call him Yugi. How the hell do you get a nickname like that? While the game doesn't have the star sign system of the previous one, it makes up for it with a brand new game-wide weirdness. It's kinda weird chess. The game is played on a 7x7 grid you can play monsters onto with different effects depending on what type they are, what space they're occupying, and who they fight. The game is absolutely bursting with strategic and mechanical depth that, in classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Game fashion, it doesn't explain. But when has that ever gotten in the way? Oh right, the last one. Yeah, I'll be frank, or Yugi, and say I don't really like Duelist of the Roses. I get why people do. It's incredibly weird and different to the point that it's really its own thing rather than just being a Yu-Gi-Oh thing, but it's just too weird for me. It's the type of weird you only really appreciate if you grew up with the game and had no other options. Of course, this is probably because I tried Kaiba's campaign first, because why would I not? Got stomped, and then found people saying, "Never play Kaiba's campaign first, oh dear god!" online. But still, it's not the sort of game that just clicks with me. That doesn't mean it didn't click for a lot of other people, though. This game has one of the biggest fan bases of any Yu-Gi-Oh game, with plenty of people not even interested in the card game praising it to no end as a really in-depth strategy game with a computer that only kind of cheats. Given that it's a sequel, and despite how different the gameplay looks, a lot of what I have to say about Forbidden Memories goes for Duelist of the Roses. It's a brand of uniqueness that is not replicated by many other games. If you want to try it out, I entirely endorse it. It's a great time if you're willing to put in the effort to understand how it works. If you want to try it for yourself, you can pick up the Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days collection. Honest, cross my heart and hope to die. If you look up anything about it beforehand, I'll be offended. Just buy it! People seriously thought they were going to include Forbidden Memories and Duelist of the Roses in this collection after showing only Game Boy games. Falsebound Kingdom. The second in a trio of games exclusive to each of the 6th generation consoles, Falsebound Kingdom is another game with a lot of oddities to it. Not least of which because, like Duelist of the Roses, it's not a game about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game. It's a game that uses the Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters as the set dressing for a strange RTS RPG. You again get the choice of either Yugi or Kaiba to start out with an unlockable Joey campaign if you beat both, with the plot being your selected character getting sucked into the virtual world by a vengeful Kaiba Corp employee when you go to test the latest virtual reality software. And now you need to beat the game to get out. Alright, not favorable comparisons being drawn between this and Scooby-Doo's Cyber Chase. The gameplay takes the form of this widespread map with players starting at either end. There are various towns and resource locations you'll need to race to capture first before your opponent can get there, so you can get yourself an advantage when it comes time for your armies to meet. When they do meet, you go to a very simple turn-based battle screen where you hit monsters against each other until the timer determines if you win or lose. Higher health at the end of the time means you win. Alright, gloves off this time. This is the worst of the 3 games. I'm sorry if you have a lot of nostalgia for this game, but buddy, so do I. I played this game so much when I was a kid, but I never got better, I just got further. This game is so goddamn slow, it's insane! Monsters walking across the map takes forever, and the battles once you get to them are sluggish and lack life. You get one option for the same attack animation every time you battle with a monster, and it'll take until the end of your first encounter for you to be tired of all of it. This game asks a huge time investment from the player, but not in a civilization way where it lets you build up resources. No, I mean it's just so slow that actually getting to the boring parts is a slog. I can see what they're trying to do. The game has a lot of side quests to collect new monsters, some having dialogue specific to them with plenty of differences between them, and over 100 monsters to collect with 3D models and attacks. But it does not make up for the fact that playing the game they're in sucks. I do not recommend this game at all. It is a real chore. Almost as much as collecting Moisture Creature to add to your army in this game. I'm just interested in this. What do you mean he's the only roaming encounter in the game on a random corner of a random map that no other mission uses that can only be found by Kaiba, and then isn't even useful? What is wrong with you, game? Alternate formats. Yu-Gi-Oh! Sucks, let's play some Yu-Gi-Oh! How you're going to be playing Yu-Gi-Oh! 99% of the time is what's called the advanced format. It's kinda hard to describe exactly what this format is outside of just saying, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! It's how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is pretty much played everywhere and has been the standard for the game's entire lifespan. Most of the game's lifespan. That said, it's not the only way you can play the game, as if you want to play something else with your Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, you can always try out alternate formats. These are Yu-Gi-Oh! Played under different rules that put unique modifiers on how the game is allowed to be played, changing the rules of the game, the card pool, and deck construction rules. While there are fan-made alternate formats, for this topic we'll be focusing solely on the Konami-sanctioned ones, and when it comes to Konami-sanctioned alt formats, you have the rest, and then you have Time Wizard. Formally established in 2022, Time Wizard is a format that allows players to travel back to previous formats in the game's history, and play as though it were that era. What I mean is that, let's say you think Yu-Gi-Oh! Broke when they introduced Xyz monsters. If you want to play without them, you can play the Edison format, which replicates the format of the 2010 Shonen Jump Championship Tournament in Edison, New Jersey. Now you too can play the Doom Caliber Knight gadget deck that came in second, that nobody knows how it got there and everybody agrees was really bad. This is the fan-favorite format for Time Wizard events, as it had a massive diversity of decks in a meta that was hugely unexplored at the time, bringing the game back to a time where it was at a beautiful balancing point between slow control and fast combo. If you remember me gushing about Over the Nexus, this is the format that game replicated, and it's great. It's also not the only one. Any historic format is up for grabs if you want to play it. Want to play crappy Magic the Gathering? GOAT format is available to play. Want to play less crappy Magic? That's what Reaper format's for. Hat format is a historically loved format from the Xyz era. Duelist Alliance is the first set that truly ushered in the modern age of Yu-Gi-Oh! A toss format was one of the last times there was a diversity of top decks, before we got our conga line of Tier 0 strategies we see nowadays. You can go back to any era you want. Except GX, which had no good formats. This is the fan-favorite alt format, since it gives people something that everybody wants, what they had before. The second favorite fan format is Rivalry of Warlords, a format that exists almost solely at YCS's, which is a rental format. At any time, a series of decks will be selectable to play with, and you have to pick one and then try to win a tournament against other people who picked their own rental decks. This serves as a much lower power format, one that Konami can curate themselves, give non-meta decks the spotlight, and introduce players to cards they might have never seen otherwise. And now for all the formats Konami forgot about. Deckmaster format is the most infamous of them because they just didn't explain how it was supposed to work. Like in Season 4 of the Duel Monsters anime, you can select one monster from your deck to act as your Deckmaster. The Deckmaster's effect would be active for the whole duel, could be activated as though it were on the field, and is unrespondable. It took people 2 seconds to realize the only Deckmaster worth using was Last Warrior from Another Planet, who says, "You cannot summon." All sorts of degenerate floodgates were picked as Deckmasters, which is fine, because I don't think a single Deckmaster game has ever been played. Common Charity is an interesting one, where you're only allowed to use cards that were printed at either common or rare rarities. This locked some decks like Sun Avalon, who have only been printed at Super and above, out of the format entirely, while other decks were able to show their stuff thanks to their low rarity spread. The format had a lot of steam initially, but after people got sick of Goki Lunalight mirror matches, the shine was firmly off the apple. By contrast, the Master Duel equivalent of this format, NR format, is one of the most popular alt formats of all time, with a massive player base still playing it, despite the event having ended years ago. Heart of the Underdog format was the least defined of all the formats, as all it said was basically, play decks that aren't meta right now. What that really meant had to be agreed upon by the tournament organizers and players, since Konami couldn't make the list themselves, since they'd have to acknowledge that some of their decks suck. Alt formats are a great idea that, if Konami put even a little bit of effort into, like they did with Time Wizard and Rivalry, could be a great way to play the game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Friendship. Yu-Gi-Oh! Rarely ventures out of the ordinary when it comes to card effects. Every once in a while we'll get a strange card like Transmission Gear, but the gap between cards with effects like that, or Question, or Linear Equation Cannon is years. One of the first cards with a truly bizarre effect, though, came out in 2002 called Yu-Gi-Oh! Friendship. The rules of the game weren't the only rules being broken, as its artwork depicts Joey and Yugi shaking hands, playing off the pun of the name where the first syllables of their names, Yu and Jo, form the word Yujo, which in Japanese means friendship. Anime characters almost never appear on tournament legal cards. Analogs for them will, quite frequently in fact. A deck like Gimmick Puppets have their pilot Quattro represented by Fantastics Machinex, Ancient Gear have Commander to represent Crowler, DDDs have Divine Zero King Rage to represent Ragey, tons of decks have these. Even decks that are more direct will give you room for doubt, like Performapal Duelist Extraordinaire, clearly having Yuya, but I mean, we can pretend it's not. Gravekeeper's Trap, Blackbird Close, Photon Time Stop. Obviously we know who they are, but they don't just put the characters directly on the cards. Yujo Friendship, Unity, and Judgment of the Pharaoh are the exceptions to this rule, as they just have the whole gang on it. They got lazy and just used a group photo for card art. The effect itself is to add up both players' life points and then redivide them so each player gets half of the total. The opponent, though, can simply refuse the effect, which is confirmed not by saying yes or no, but by accepting a handshake. This is, to this day, the only card in the game that requires physical contact between players to properly resolve. Transmission Gear got close, but covering your opponent's rock with your paper is purely a power move. This card needed you to shake your opponent's hand. This card was obviously designed first as a fun card to reference Yugi and Joey's friendship, a nice gift for the relationship that meant so much to the series. People were labbing out how to use it to fuck with people from day one. The most popular idea was to make your hand disgusting with stuff like Doritos or honey or dog shit, and then offer your opponent a handshake. If they refuse to engage, they get an automatic game loss for not playing by the rules. Can't they just say no? Well, no in fact. Because Yujo Friendship has the effect to reveal unity in your hand to force your opponent to accept the handshake. This problem was so rampant that Konami had to make up a new ruling saying that you don't have to physically shake your opponent's hand, instead all you have to do is consent to the idea of a handshake. Your opponent offers you one and you say, yes, I would shake your hand. And that's the end of it. At least that's what I thought. Are you guys familiar with the case of Devil Joe eating his own tail? I want to talk about this more, I just need to find more topics that fit this niche, but basically the Monster Hunter community was convinced the monster Devil Joe ate his own tail because he's a trash compactor who eats anything. When a new fan asked for footage of Devil Joe eating his own tail, everybody realized at once he actually doesn't eat his own tail, and everybody was just convinced that he did and accepted that he could. But really, he can't. I think that's what happened with Yujo Friendship. I can't find any rulings databases, blog posts, or forum posts anywhere that cite the idea of a handshake as the official rule. The wiki says that's the rule, but without citing an official source. Nowhere on the internet does it actually exist a ruling regarding Yujo Friendship. The closest I can find to it is a random old post from an old card maker forum that references the idea of a handshake. I wouldn't go poking around too much. The topic changes from Yujo Friendship to cutting off people's hands to homophobia like that. Is it possible that's just how some judges ruled it at events where the hand trick was tried? Maybe, but I think the ruling would have been secondary to taking that guy outside and stomping him to death. Which is more likely? You stick your hand down your pants at the Yu-Gi-Oh tournament, and then your opponent gives you the round win. Or you stick your hand down your pants at the Yu-Gi-Oh tournament and get shot. This is one of those things that sounds so funny, the concept of a handshake, that it kinda just got passed around as gospel despite no sources being around. It was eventually made a rule in remote duels and in following tournaments that followed COVID guidelines, but I was making this joke to my non-Yu-Gi-Oh friends back in high school. This joke's been around for a long time. This was supposed to be me talking about sticking our hands down our pants, but I ended up finding a years-long hoax about a card game online. If I had a nickel. Broken Game AI. Programming a Yu-Gi-Oh video game is much harder than it sounds. Being able to craft an AI that's able to understand the intricacies of the game, of their deck, what cards to use, when to use them, how to play around what an opponent has, it's all very hard. There's a reason most fan-made simulators either forego a versus computer mode, or use a pre-scripted one that uses banned cards because fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. Heck, Konami themselves doesn't even have the best track record of it, which is epitomized by an infamous line from the GBA game Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Academy. I played this game so much I asked my parents if I could go to Duel Academy. The line would be used during a duel with Zane Truesdale, a secret opponent in the game who could only be dueled by beating Cyrus enough to summon him. In the story, Zane is Duel Academy's ace student, the best they have to offer. He's meant to be a secret boss that gets triggered if you pick on Cyrus too much, a feature carried over from previous games where dueling Mokuba too much triggered a fight with Kaiba. It's in this duel, though, you get the infamous line, "Make no mistake, I am the best duelist." I summon Maneater Bug in attack position. Claiming to be the best duelist in the school before summoning a flip monster in attack position got people to notice how bad the game's AI can be sometimes, and how often it will make suboptimal or stupid plays that in no way benefit it. With the Maneater Bug example, I can actually explain why this one happens. See, the game's AI is programmed to keep the duel moving at a fair skip, and so tries to keep the pace of the duel going depending on how the player is playing. If the player is playing offensively, the computer will play more cards in defense and set more traps. If the player plays defensively, the computer will turn all of its stuff to attack position and try to win the game. This makes the game's AI really easy to exploit into making suboptimal plays if you simply play aggressively or defensively to trick it into playing into either way that benefits you. Let's say you have a trap card in your hand that absolutely needs to resolve or else you'll lose the duel, like a Mirror Force when your opponent's field is flooded with monsters. By simply setting spell and trap cards except the Mirror Force, you'll be able to easily bait out any destruction your opponent has, since they're immediately going to gun for whatever you set. Then all you need to do is set the Mirror Force, and you win. What happened in the Zane screenshot is likely the player either having no monsters or all defense position monsters. So instead of holding back the bug or setting it, it simply summoned it in order to attack for game. That's not the only way to break a Yu-Gi-Oh! Game's AI. A common example in Master Duel is to set up a situation in solo mode where any move would kill the computer. Setting up a lock using the Trickstar cards, where activating a card like Gladiator's Proving Ground would trigger a bunch of burn effects, is one such example, since the computer would be unable to make a decision. It's like chess, where the computer won't make a decision that would lead to its defeat. Except here, it only realized it made the choice after it was too late to take it back. There are plenty of stories of people finding the AI to be less than competent, with acts like using Torrential Tribute on itself, or using Gold Sarcophagus to search an additional Gold Sarcophagus. As long as these games keep letting you play against computers, we'll find ways to break them. Sometimes that means metaphorically, but other times it can mean spiritually. Making the computer surrender. An extension of the previous topic, except this time, instead of breaking a game's AI on accident, we'll be breaking it on purpose. If you remember the first layer, we discussed Tier 0 strategies, and the first of them was a combo involving Chaos Emperor Dragon and Yatagarasu. By using Chaos Emperor Dragon's effect, you destroy your opponent's field and entire hand. Then using a card like Sangan, you get Yatagarasu. You poke in, deny your opponent their draw phase, return Yata, and repeat until they surrender. Well, seeing as various games allow for the usage of banned cards, like the Tag Force series, World Championship series, and Legacy of the Duelist, they included a mechanic to stop duels from going on so long as the opponent is poked over and over again with Yatagarasu. If the computer is put into an infinite loop situation like this, where it has no option left except get poked repeatedly by Yatagarasu, the game will actually surrender on purpose rather than let the game continue. This also gives the player a hefty bonus when doling out duel points for being able to pull off such a difficult feat. Whether you want to call it an Easter egg or a workaround for people who wanted to torture a computer, it's a really cool inclusion to see Konami acknowledge the strength of the combo and then reward you for pulling it off. Necrovalley. Erratas are a love 'em or hate 'em part of the game. Some people appreciate being able to play with classic cards, Others think they get neutered by the change. Would cards like Crush Card Virus and Chaos Emperor Dragon be better off if they just stayed banned instead of coming off with their terrible new effects? Certainly, but this is not a one-size-fits-all system. In fact, some cards benefit from their errata, like Armory Arm. In the original printing, Armory Arm was able to form a loop using Colossal Fighter to burn the opponent to death, but it eventually got errata'd to take away that capability. With Edison format gaining steam though, and Armory Arm functioning as it did pre-errata at the event the format is named for, in Hidden Arsenal Chapter 1, they reprinted Armory Arm with its pre-errata effect. Other times it can be confusing, like Raiko Lightsworn Hunter, who has been errata'd 5 times due to Konami not knowing if they want Raiko's 2 effects to target or not, or if they want them to apply in sequence or simultaneously. The crown jewel of erratas, though, with a whopping 9 erratas in total, is Necrovalley. Necrovalley is the field spell of the first ever archetype in the game, Gravekeepers, and basically has 2 effects. The first is that Gravekeepers gain 500 attack and defense. That's the easy part. The second idea, conceptually, is that Necrovalley is meant to keep any card effect from working if they involve the graveyard. Thematically, Necrovalley is supposed to be the Gravekeeper's domain, a stretch of land where the living and dead interconnect, but never cross. If you're on one plane, you can't enter the other. Flavor-wise, that being the effect of the Gravekeepers is fantastic, but apparently making this effect work is impossible. The first printing of Necrovalley reads, as long as this card is face-up on the field, all effects of magic, trap, and/or effect monster cards that involve graveyards are negated, and neither player can remove cards in the graveyard from play. In addition, increase the attack and defense of all monsters that include Gravekeeper in their card name by 500 points. Already? What the hell does this mean? Effects that involve graveyards? So, if a monster like Mystic Tomato is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, well, it mentions the graveyard, so I guess that would count, right? It would have to. It involves the graveyard. The first errata didn't solve much, since it simply swapped magic for spell cards, but the next functional reprint would come in Dark Revelations Volume 1. As long as this card remains on the field, negate the effects of spell, trap, and monster cards that affect a card in the graveyard, and neither player can remove cards in the graveyard from play. Also, as long as this card remains on the field, increase the attack and defense of all monsters that include Gravekeepers in their card names by 500 points. Alright, that clears things up a little. So the card effect has to affect a card in the grave. Stuff like Monster Reborn or Call of the Haunted won't work. The Champion Pack 3 reprint of the card cleared things up further by removing bloated text like, as long as this card remains face-up on the field. The Turbo Pack 2 reprint of the card changed the effect again to only negate cards that targeted cards in the graveyard. Targeting? Targeting? Who the hell was talking about targeting? Structure Deck Merrick's version of the card reverted the text somewhat, so now the graveyards can't be affected by card effects unless the card is already in the graveyard. So a card like Madolche Butlerusk, who shuffles himself back into the deck when destroyed, won't be affected by Necrovalley, since the effect moving it is its own? The Yugi's World reprint of Necrovalley changed the effect again, now saying that any effect that would move a card from the graveyard to a different place is negated. Well, now Butlerusk is staying dead, but this wording is totally unique to Necrovalley, simply referring to anywhere other than the graveyard as a different place. The card would calm down for about 5 years until the pack Duelist saga, where it underwent another errata, this time so that now it wouldn't just stop cards from moving out of the graveyard, but now they couldn't change their type or attribute while in the graveyard. I have no idea how many cards this actually affects until Declaration of Rebirth gets printed, but as far as I can tell, this was a direct f*** you to the Element Sabers. Hasn't life treated them poorly enough? The final two erratas are nothing special, simply saving precious space by swapping graveyard to GY, and then specifying that only gravekeepers on the field get the attack boost. Oh, thank goodness. Otherwise we'd have to errata it again to make sure monsters can't gain attack in the grave too. Lock up Grandpa's casket, he's getting stronger! Necrovalley is a sort of monument to the continue evolving complexity of Yu-Gi-Oh! The more the game evolves, and the more things that can happen in the graveyard, the more particular the wording needs to get on Necrovalley. And, ironically, this resting place keeps being in constant commotion. Emergency ban lists. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is hanging on by a thread, and I'm about ready to make some cuts. There's a good chance that at any point in Yu-Gi-Oh!'s history, there's some card making a format a nightmare to play. You look back at Kashtira format, people wanted a Rise Heart's head on a stick. For all of 2022, people wanted to see a cave-in at the Mystic Mine. Dragon Rulers would have been tolerable if they didn't have a draw 8 in the form of Super Rejuvenation. Unhealthy, annoying cards exist in Yu-Gi-Oh!, and for the most part, they get dealt with in due time. Sometimes, though, that due date gets shifted up when a format gets real bad. These are called emergency ban lists, and quantifying exactly how many there have been is difficult. What makes a ban list an emergency ban list varies depending on who you ask. Some people define it as a meta-warping list that hits as many cards as possible, which would include stuff like the September 2017 list that finally killed Zoodiac and tried slowing True Draco down, the January 2019 list that finally put down problem cards like Topologic Gumblar Dragon, Fairy Tale Snow, and Grinder Golem, or the January 2020 list, which said, "F you, you're not playing Toss anymore," and Endymion, "F you in particular, you little bitch." These are definitely the type of ban list least often referred to as an emergency one, but you're still likely to see people refer to them as one due to their explosive effects on the game. The much more common type of lists, called emergency ban lists, are the ones announced outside of the usual ban list cycle. You can expect a certain amount of time between lists, and when that trend is broken, people notice and take it to mean something real bad is going down. Funny enough, that September 2017 ban list is, again, considered an emergency ban list by these standards, thanks to it coming out between the June 2017 and November 2017 ban lists. That means there was only a 2-month break between the September and November ban lists. Given what was banned, I can see why it was needed. The first proper emergency banning came back in December of 2006, after the final ban list of Reaper format, as many of its key cards, like Chaos Sorcerer, Tsukiyomi, and of course Spirit Reaper, were limited or banned. The biggest hit, though, wouldn't come for a few more months as we finally hit the card that was tearing the game apart, Cyberstein. Originally a prize card, available in a quantity so low you could count all printed copies, given you could count to 18, Cyberstein has the effect to summon out a fusion monster for free at the cost of 5,000 life points. While it was initially no issue due to its scarcity and lack of powerful options, both of those problems would soon be resolved with the release of the Cyber Dragon fusions in Cybernetic Revolution. Cyber Twin Dragon allowed for double attacking to clear out multiple monsters, while Cyber End Dragon allowed for piercing damage, which in combination with a card like Megamorph, which required your life points to be lower than your opponent's, which they would be if you activated Cyberstein, that meant that running these 3 cards could end the game in 1 activation. He does so much for these bums and he still can't be considered a cyber monster? It became the norm for any deck that had the option to play Cyberstein playing it, because its power level was just insane. It's not like you were hurting for extra deck space either. The extra deck still didn't have a cap on it, and what else were you putting in it? The second problem, Cyberstein's availability, stopped being a problem when the prize card saw a reprint in Dark Beginnings Volume 2 at Rare. Now 3 Cybersteins in every deck became the norm. Recognizing that Cyberstein was in fact busted to shit, Cyberstein got smacked with the banhammer individually on December 21st, less than a week after a Stein OTK mirror match was the grand finals of the SGC San Jose tournament. Then Konami brought it back because we were looking too comfortable. The last recognized emergency list is also the strangest, as following the release of Breaker of Shadows, a new Tier 0 deck had emerged, Pepe. Short for Performapal Performage, this deck used the best cards of both strategies to spam the field like it had never been spammed before. While both halves of the deck had seen independent success, with Performage especially being used heavily as the clown engine, Breaker of Shadows gave both decks the last pieces they needed to make it unstoppable. This set gave Performapals the incredible Monkey Board, which immediately converted into either Skullcrobat Joker or Pendulum Sorcerer, 2 very important parts of the deck. While not first appearing in Breaker of Shadows, Performages had access to Plushfire, a card that spammed monsters from deck upon destruction with no once per turn. Draco Face-Off was a generic pendulum tool that immediately got you access to the powerful Draco Slayer monsters, Luster Pendulum in particular. Arguably the biggest part of Breaker of Shadows was the inclusion of a Cyber Dragon card, Cyber Dragon Infinity. Normally summoned off the effect of Cyber Dragon Nova, the card was broken wide open by Tellarknight Ptolemaeus, which could turn itself into Nova, instantly making Infinity. Hate to steal a joke here, but it was more of a big deal that Ptolemaeus could make Infinity than it was that Ptolemaeus had the ability to skip the opponent's turn. At the deck's only premier event at full power, 29 of the top 32 spots were taken up by Pepe. The only other deck to get that much representation was Zoodiacs. Nothing else comes close. This would be the only event that Pepe would be at full power at, because it entered at a dead man. 3 days prior to the event, Konami released an adjusted Banlist that literally was just hits to kill Pepe. You had the banning of Performage's Plushfire and Damage Juggler, as well as Ptolemaeus. Limits included Skullcrobat, Monkey Board, and Luster Pendulum. And like that, the deck was finally brought back into sync with the rest of the format. What makes this one the strangest, though, is how the ban list was optional to an extent. Official stores were told they had the choice between using the list or not, and those that elected to use it had to print out the list to confirm they'd be playing under it. The announcement admits as much, that they want players to enjoy the less than month-old cards, but this was getting kinda ridiculous. These lists don't happen very often, but when they do, it's just nice to know we're not going crazy, that this shit does actually suck. The Tokyo Dome riots. In fact, sometimes it sucks so bad, people gotta die. I can say that because nobody actually died. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a product for Konami that, in the early days, still had something to prove. The card game was broadly treated as a side project to what was making Konami the most money at the time, video games. Video games were treated on equal footing to the card game, similarly to how it is now with Master Duel, and at the first ever tournament for Yu-Gi-Oh!, the two shared a similar level of prominence. Between that first tournament and the one we're going to be talking about, though, the card game would start to outpace the success of the video games and find a huge fandom on its own, one that Konami stoked the flames of with the release of Exodia. He's come up a few different times now, but if you thought putting all 5 pieces in one pack was a challenge, imagine getting each piece, one by one, across 4 different packs. Starting from the pack Volume 3 onwards, they'd release the limbs one at a time, with the legs coming in Volume 3 and Volume 4, and the arms being special collectibles alongside the first 2 volumes of the Dark Duel Stories game guides. You had to put in a lot of legwork in order to collect the pieces, and for the final one, Konami wanted you to put in even more effort. The head was the most important part. This was the thing that made Exodia worth anything. people had to have it. Instead of gambling on packs or stockpiling strategy guides, this time Konami would distribute the head in an exclusive pack at the Tokyo Dome for the Duel Monsters Legends Tournament, another half TCG, half video game tournament. The day of the tournament arrives, and so too do 65,000 people, all fiending for Exodia. Konami turned back, saw the single, as in one booth that would distribute the pack, and realized something bad was about to happen. A wave of people crashed into the Tokyo Dome, demanding the pack, and they quickly overwhelmed that single booth, with packs selling out near instantly, and people becoming belligerent as they were denied the very thing they had spent months collecting. That was just for the people who got in. The Tokyo Dome has a capacity of 55,000 people, so an additional 10,000 people were trapped outside, baking in the summer heat. The crowds became so raucous that Konami canned the tournament at the semi-final round and got out of Dodge, quickly announcing a mail-in alternative for the Exodia piece they had missed out on. In all, 2 people were hospitalized with injuries from the event, and many more sustained injury thanks to Konami's mismanagement. While the mail-in orders were redeemed, Konami played it doubly safe and released the pack Phantom God, which included all 5 Exodia pieces in one place. This would eventually come around in the pack The Infinite Forbidden, when the latest Exodia retrain was called, in Japan, the Phantom Exodia Incarnate. From here on out, Konami was much more aware of Yu-Gi-Oh's popularity and much more cautious about releasing mechanically unique cards in limited quantities, now settling for them being prize cards for tournament winners. And to top it all off, the Exodia deck that came from this was practically unbeatable, due to Exodia being at 3 for all of his parts, and Pot of Greed being legal. Imagine being stomped to death in line and then getting stomped to death in the game. Korean exclusive archetypes. Last time, we discussed archetypes designed by, and released first, in America, those being TCG exclusive decks. America isn't the only territory to get exclusive cards though, as another one does as well, South Korea. South Korea, next to Japan, is the biggest consumer of card games in the OCG region, and not only has seen a steady release of cards in congruity with Japan's releases, but just like America, has gotten the chance to design their own cards for first release in their region. Funny enough, Korea's exclusives began production around the same time America's did, as Galactic Overlord introduced the world to the Noble Knights, while Legacy of the Valiant introduced it to the Entities. A series of monsters based around the work of H.P. Lovecraft, Entities set 2 of the most consistent trends for all Korean exclusive cards and archetypes that would follow. Firstly, their effects would be very unique and strong. Cards like Nyarla could steal opponents' monsters and copy their effects, Hastor could equip itself to an opponent's monster to steal it away, Kathuga could give you advantage when used for an additional summon, all disparate, but nonetheless cool stuff. That's not even going into the entities who have seen a massive amount of competitive play, like Intis for her ability to pop a card when sent to the graveyard, Norden for his ability to revive a monster when sent to the graveyard, and Azathoth who could skip an opponent's entire turn. The other trend set by the Korean cards is that they are f***ing scary. The artwork on the entities, outer entities specifically, is infamously creepy and un-Yu-Gi-Oh-like. Nyarla and Azathoth are 2 of the cards I always use to showcase Yu-Gi-Oh's art diversity, usually next to a Melfi or Fluffle, sandwiched between Nyarla and Vendread Chimera. Also, for a deck based on Lovecraft, not racing to make one based on Cthulhu was an inspired choice. Obligatory comment about the cat. The next deck they would make though, this would really put Korea on the map. Oh, buddy, you have come to the wrong guy to talk about these bad boys. Paleo is my favorite deck in the game. A series of level 2 water aqua monsters who aren't monsters, but traps. Based on ancient sea life found in the Burgess Shale, these guys start out as strong utility traps that, while in the grave, can be revived as monsters when another trap is activated, immune to all monster effects. These make them incredible at spamming the field and making powerful rank 2s, like Totally Awesome, Gigantic Sprite, and their in-house Xyz, Anomalocaris and Opabinia. These have been fan favorites for the going on decade they've been in the game, and ever since last year have been one of my favorite parts of that game. I was going through a really rough patch of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And had pretty much no decks I could play that could hang with the meta. So I dusted everything I had in Master Duel, crafted Joshua Schmidt Paleos with Laundry Dragon, Soldier Dragons, and eventually Magicaloidal Soul, and named it Bet the Farm, because I was putting everything on this deck. Without Paleos, I probably wouldn't have the motivation to make this Iceberg. So, thank you, Korea. Thank you very much for this. Since Paleo's release 10 years ago in The Dark Illusion, there hasn't been another Korean-made archetype. Even then, the individual cards they've made have seen plenty of play on their own. Fiendish Rhino Warrior has seen play in Fiend decks since the moment it dropped stateside. Mare's token spawning ability made it a must-play in any deck that could summon it. And Plankton looks fucking weird. For hire effect text. One of Yu-Gi-Oh's strangest moments. So, deck build packs are a style of pack that gets released pretty frequently. And what it is the chance to release 3 archetypes at the same time that are supposed to be playable right out of the pack. You don't have to scour across multiple packs to collect a bunch of support, you just have to open one and you'll eventually get what you need. One of these packs was called Dark Saviors, and it supported 3 decks. First was a remake of the Vampire archetype, bringing the deck up to speed with modern support, replacing the old Bleed playstyle that would mill cards from the opponent's deck a la Vampire Lord, with a new Mind Control playstyle that could modulate levels depending on who owned the card originally. The second was a hugely successful archetype, Sky Strikers. This was a deck of 1 monster that could tag out into various alternate forms depending on what you needed, and it flourished when it had multiple spell cards in the graveyard. The final one is... let's just call them by their Japanese name for now, Skyfang Brigade. Skyfang is one of the most boring, uninteresting decks in the entire game. All it does is summon out monsters, and then does stuff if a monster is summoned. This deck has 0 sauce, 0 memorable anything about it. The one cool thing is that you can trade in their field spell for a board wipe, because you crashed their car into the opponent. This deck is so dull, Snork, me. Seeing that this deck would be forgotten about by the time players opened their first Sky Striker card, Konami of America decided to get... funky. Skyfang Brigade's name was localized to Fur Hire. The deck's themed after these Sky Pirate themed animals, so while it doesn't represent what they were going for with Skyfang Brigade, it does get across the idea that these mercenary services are for hire. This also led to a bunch of naming puns, like every card being blank something for hire. Beat, Bladesmith, for hire. Dinah, Hero, for hire. Philo, Messenger, for hire. Even extending to one of the longest card names in the game, Training for Hire, for all your training needs. Except they decided to take the joke even further and tread where very few archetypes ever did, the wording of effect text. See, most every archetype lists itself in the effect text as blank monsters. So if you're searching for a Blue Eyes, a card would say add 1 Blue Eyes monster from deck to hand. Same with Heroes, or Salamangrates, or whatever. For Hire, meanwhile, alters the text to put the archetype's name after the card type you're searching. So this leads to cards being written out as add 1 monster, for hire, from your deck to your hand. It's written out this way like the card is a wanted ad looking for monsters who are for hire. People hated this. It was seen as a needless, memey way to make jokes about cards in a way that isn't present in the original Japanese text. I understand the point, but I also think that if any deck needed to be tampered with to make it the slightest bit memorable, Skyfang Brigade was it. Capsule Monsters. Capsule Monsters is a 12-episode miniseries spin-off of the first series of Yu-Gi-Oh!, following Yugi and his friends as they get lost in the world of Capsule Monsters, which is like Yu-Gi-Oh!, except instead of having a hand of cards, you do the cup and ball trick to summon your monsters. Like the Metarex arc of Sonic X, or the ending of Ultimate Muscle, this is a 4Kids original season, commissioned by them to help drum up interest in this new branch of Yu-Gi-Oh! Based on this new game they tried making. Like Dungeon Dice Monsters, this would also get a physical adaptation that's even rarer than the Dungeon Dice Monsters one is, and a video game, which, again like Dungeon Dice Monsters, is super difficult to understand now and probably has a fan base that's much bigger than I anticipated. The miniseries itself is a very weird project, taking bits and pieces from shows like Pokemon and Digimon, mixing them together in a way that's pretty far from smooth. Instead of Pokeballs, you get capsules that you shoot out like bullets, even with the cartridge flying out afterwards. You get the being trapped in a new world from Digimon, and even the merging with monsters out of Digimon Frontiers. You might forget there's Yu-Gi-Oh! In this too! The miniseries was released on DVD as what's called a feature-length film, a 3-hour one, that has credits in the middle. If I've sounded any bit more low energy in this one, I'll be straight with you, this is bad. It's really not good. If the movie is a truncated version of the original miniseries, I'd hate to have to watch that one because it's a real slog to watch in its shortened version. Just nothing happens for a really, really long time. It's just hours of characters not really accomplishing much. Getting a mission, finishing it, getting another mission, finishing that. Just on repeat for a long time. Every once in a while, they'll throw out an interesting idea, like Joey getting brainwashed, never seen that one before, and Tristan asking, "Why am I even here?" But it gets stuck in a rut for a long time of repeating ideas without anything to spice it up. I was gonna say the fights are cool, but the pacing ruins everything, as I don't think we ever get to see a fight from start to finish without some sort of interruption. It's got mindless fun moments, like Yugi fusing with the Dark Magician and Blue Eyes, but it's not enough to keep my attention. I actually found out while putting the timeline together that the Capsule Monsters miniseries is actually predated by the Capsule Monsters video game, instead of what I thought, which was the other way around. It turns out this is actually the third Capsule Monsters game in a series that spans all the way back to the earliest days of the franchise. I won't delve into too much detail, since we'll be talking about it later, but we're talking the first ever Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. This is its sequel. The reason this was the first one was because Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually had Capsule Monsters as a game before Duel Monsters, with it being one of the games played in the Season 0 portion of the story. It's a real shame that everything surrounding Capsule Monsters is more interesting than the content itself. If you really want to watch it, it's out there. I just don't know why you would want to. Dueling Book. For as much fun as physical TCGs can be, that physical aspect makes them extremely difficult for some people to enjoy. Some people don't have stores that run Yu-Gi-Oh! Events near them. Some people don't have nearby friends who can play the game. Heck, some people don't have the money to spend on a luxury like Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. As such, online simulators have been an extremely important part of Yu-Gi-Oh! And really all TCG's growth. both official and unofficial. There are dozens and dozens of Yu-Gi-Oh! Simulators out there. From the classic Percy and the various games that used its infrastructure, like the newest version from the original development team Edo Pro, to the ill-fated dawn of the new era, which lost almost its entire player base after it was hacked and sent out bugged software that compromised users' personal information. I'd be remiss if I mentioned Dawn and didn't mention my favorite thing ever. Some friends of mine were watching Yu-Gi-Oh! With me. They weren't duelists, just guys who remembered the anime, and at the end of a clip was this extremely bizarre commercial.
What are you waiting for, sir? Go check out our game, orale!
The one that started it all, though, after Virtual Desktop, but who's counting, is Dueling Network. Dueling Network was a passion project by Chris Salvarani, a programmer who, in between college classes, thought about how cool it would be to have an online dueling simulator that stuck as close to real life as possible. In May of 2011, Chris and a team of like-minded Yu-Gi-Oh! Programmers were able to create Dueling Network, an entirely in-browser Yu-Gi-Oh! Simulator that delivered Yu-Gi-Oh! As Chris intended. Unlike stuff like the video games, which were largely automated, Dueling Network was all manual. That meant that if you wanted to play a deck, you had to understand exactly what it did, how it worked, what lines were possible, and what locks it would put you under all on your own. This arguably raised the collective player IQ of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community, as now more players than ever had to understand the game to a level they never had to before. The game came with a lot of bonus features, like friend lists, lobby creation, customization. In no time at all, this game took over the Yu-Gi-Oh! Online scene as people were flooding the site. Thousands of duelists all online at the same time. This was a massive boon for people who wanted to play a deck and test it before investing in the paper product, or content creators who wanted to make Yu-Gi-Oh! Videos, and now could, with the entire card pool and a huge pool of players to play against. If you have a Yu-Gi-Tuber you watch, chances are they have a lot of their backlog thanks to Dueling Network. Though this entry is called Dueling Book, right? Well, that's because of an issue that arose in 2016, when not Konami, but Nihon Ad Systems finally sent a cease and desist. Nihon is the company who handles the copyright to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime and a lot of other facets to the franchise. It's a confusing topic. They wanted to take Dueling Network down, which they nearly succeeded at. At first, Network tried to comply by removing all of the card artwork, which almost worked, except for how it didn't, and got the site taken down officially. Dueling Network would stay down for 6 months until Dueling Book rose up to take its place. A site with all the same functionality and developers as the old one, with the benefit of some much-needed improvements. However, like I said, if you take away people's ability to play a card game, they're just gonna move on to a new card game. The site's still up today, but it's used far less. Some YouTube series like Progression still use it, thanks to its ease of use and card pool, but the general public shifted over to Edo, Omega, and eventually Master Duel once those options were available. It may be sad to know that the site is past its prime, but even still, it's worth keeping around as a monument to what the community once congregated around. Magic cards. Yu-Gi-Oh's 3 main card types have been around since the very first set of the game. You have the monsters, your damage dealers who battle your opponent's army, your trap cards to throw a wrench in their efforts, and the spell cards to assist your monsters in the fight. Except at the very start of the game's life, things were different. We had monsters and traps, but instead of spells, we had magic cards. Functionally, they're the exact same as spell cards, just with a different name, but it was still worth noting this card super type used to be called something completely different. From the very first set released in America, all the way up until October 10th, 2003, they were called Magic cards. When, on that date, the verbiage switched to spell cards and never looked back. Why was the change made? Well, let's put our thinking caps on. What confusion could possibly arise from having your TCG have the word magic featured so prominently? Let me ask this gathering what magic could possibly mean. Magic the Gathering is the granddaddy of all TCGs, and has remained a constant fixture of the top 5 best-selling TCGs in America ever since its release. We're still waiting to see how many secret layers it will take to kill it, but it's not going anywhere, and everybody took inspiration from it. It's almost impossible to find a TCG not inspired by Magic the Gathering. Looking at any of them, and if you see one that has a resource system or something like lands, that's because of Magic. And it's not unbelievable to think Yu-Gi-Oh! Took something too. With Magic cards playing such a prominent part in Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's assumed that Wizards of the Coast, the company who owns Magic the Gathering, started taking notice. This only intensified with the release of the core set Magic Rulers in September of 2002, creating further connections between Magic cards and Magic's cards. Starting from Magician's Force onwards, Magic got swapped to Spell, and the rest is history. Now, I tell this story about WotC coming after Konami like it's ever been confirmed, when really the two companies have never commented on the naming of Magic cards. WotC never publicly voiced a problem with the Magic cards, and Konami never said anything about having to change it. Now, they won't tell us anything, like who even makes the cards, so it's not like we can rely on them for anything, but still, if anything, I'd guess it was a proactive change on Konami's part. Imagine a kid asking their parent for the new pack. Oh, I want Magic Ruler! They get to the store and they kinda just remember, the kid wanted Magic cards. Oh, hey. Then they pick up a Magic booster and another child is lost. I'd be doubly willing to bet that that's the case because this seems to be an entirely American problem. Thanks to the Japanese side of the equation, we can tell that this is a one-sided issue. In Japan, where Yu-Gi-Oh! Is unquestionably bigger by a magnitude of 10, they never stopped calling their cards Magic cards. In fact, the two never had an issue due to Yu-Gi-Oh! Using the Japanese word for magic, Maho, to refer to spell cards, while Magic uses the translation for the English word Majiku.
マジック・ザ・ギャザリングアリーナモバイル
まだ俺のバトルフェーズは終了してないぜ。速攻魔法発動。
This makes me even more sure about the confusion problem, since Magic's firmer establishment in America would mean that if push came to shove, Yu-Gi-Oh! Would be the first to budge. A byproduct of the Magic to Spell change is an interesting oversight that happens to occur in games like World Championship 2004. To update the spell cards who have only ever been printed as Magic cards, like, let's say, Gravekeeper's Servant, Konami will go in and automatically replace every instance of Magic found in cards printed before Magician's Force with Spell. This works great for mass changes, but as anybody with a shotgun will say, widespread does often lose the finer details. When using Yugi's ace monster, Dark Magician, everything is fine. But cards who refer to Dark Magician in their effect text, like Dark Sage and Dark Magician Girl, would refer to him as Dark Spellian. Like going Control F in a document, they found every instance of magic and replaced it with spell. They managed to fix the monsters with Magician in their name and switch them back, but forgot to check the effect text of cards like this and left it as Spellian. A similar thing would happen years and years later, as recently as Master Duel, where you would find a deck challenge that tasked you with using a Dark Spellian deck. While Yu-Gi-Oh's never gone for a full-on joke set like Magic will do, if they ever do, I swear there'd better be an official Dark Spellian in there. Air Neos and the missing Master Duel cards. Part of the appeal of Yu-Gi-Oh's massive card pool is that you're allowed to use whatever cards you want in whatever deck you're playing. This is how we get techs like Mushroom Man number 2 in Kashtira, or Marionette Might being legit tech against Unchained. With so many cards, though, it's also super likely that a few will slip through the cracks. You're not going to be able to notice if a few of them just stop existing. Master Duel is almost the perfect simulator, but it's missing a not insignificant pool of cards that mean it can never claim to have every card ever made. First up is the biggest pool, that all have the same explanation, those being cards with artwork by Kazuki Takahashi. Whether it's a rights dispute or some sort of legal problem, cards with artwork by Kazuki Takahashi are not allowed in Master Duel. Whether it's alt art or a card's only artwork, cards like Red Eye's Alternative Black Dragon, Blue Eye's Alternative Ultimate Dragon, Palladium Oracle Mana, Ankh Karibo, Neo Kaiser Glider, and Shiba Warrior Taro have and never will be released. While most of these haven't had much effect in the long run, they're first and foremost for collecting and not gameplay purposes, one of them actually did really hurt a deck in Master Duel's infancy. Megalith was a deck that saw on-again, off-again meta play during its lifespan, but was considered rogue in the real game thanks to a card called Magician of Black Chaos Max. It had the ability to stop all monster effects for an entire turn when it was ritual summoned, and Megalith had access to a quick play ritual summon that summoned Max on the opponent's turn, forcing them to pass after maybe setting a card or two. This was the Megalith strategy. And with the lack of Max in Master Duel, thanks to the widespread Takahashi purge, Megalith never saw the play it did outside of the NR format. Oh no, another summoning mechanic doesn't get a dumbass turn skip. I'm ballin' over here. Another card that was left out, kinda because of Takahashi, was Muyan Curry. Yeah, check it out right now. Muyan Curry isn't in Master Duel. Why? Because they were 1-0 away from a lawsuit. Moyan Curry is an actual curry chain in Japan that Takahashi loved going to, and so made this card in tribute to his favorite curry shop. The curry shop loved the tribute, and even gives special treatment to people who bring the card to the store. But Konami, probably fearing a lawsuit if they ever got sick of the joke, didn't put it in Master Duel. It isn't Duel Links, so I'm probably talking out of my butt here. Then there are the cards that are left out of Master Duel because they'd be a pain in the ass to program. These include Bait Doll and forcing the opponent to activate spells and traps they don't want to, Convulsion of Nature and flipping the deck upside down, Pole Position for pretty much only creating infinite loops, the usual suspects. Spellbinding Circle isn't in the game. I don't understand this one. Spellbinding Circle has nothing wrong with it like the other ones do. It's an original design, it's not drawn by Takahashi, its effect is completely comprehensible. I really have no idea. If I had gotten the lead out and done this a few weeks ago, I'd be just as in the dark about this next card, but we now have a much clearer image. This is the story of Yu-Gi-Oh's most infamous lost card, Elemental Hero Air Neos. Air Neos is a member of the Neospatian wing of the Hero Mass, fusing Air Hummingbird and Neos like Neos could do with all of the Neospatians. He was released in the set Strike of Neos, even being the cover card for the set, available in Ultimate and Ultra Rare. Aside from one more reprinting in Japan in Master Collection Volume 3, this card would never be seen or heard from again. It has been wiped from history completely. Every other Neos fusion would get reprinted at some point, even the expensive ones like Rainbow Neos. But Air Neos would never get one. I would know because I experienced this firsthand. When I went to college, I was depressed. Getting the full college experience and all, I decided to drop by my local GameStop since they had Yu-Gi-Oh cards for sale. I bought one pack of Savage Strike and opened it, only to get the super rare Neos Fusion. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was my fragile emotions at the time. Maybe it was the nostalgia I had for these monsters specifically. But Neos Fusion is the card that brought me back to Yu-Gi-Oh! I started buying the Neospatians and Neos cards off TCG Player with a vanilla prepaid card because I still didn't have a debit card in college, and when I went to go get the Air Neos, I just about fell out of my chair. Stuff like the Hero Mat, which this script is being typed on, featured all of the Neos fusions except for two, Glow Neos and Air Neos. Glow Neos I get, because it stinks. But why was Air Neos excluded? When Neos next got support in Power of the Elements, the card Instant Contact was revealed, which was based on this specific frame from the third opening of GX, Teardrop. It featured all of the Neos fusions in super cool artwork, except for Air Neos, which was shifted down to only leave just about his wings visible in the artwork, even drawn in the wrong color. What in the hell was wrong with Air Neos? For years, we just had speculation to go off of. And maybe it was a rights dispute? Maybe it had something to do with the Italian airline called Neos? Some people said it was because Kazuki Takahashi designed this card and wanted to keep it close to his chest. While it is true he designed a few of the hero monsters, this dude didn't even keep a drawing of his real-life dog as close to him. Why would he pick Air Neos over his dog? We would be left without answers for the decade following its release, until 2025, when the story finally broke. The Zoodiac Duelist Facebook page, specifically the user Yu-Gi-Oh! Wind, found court documents that explained everything. Konami had been sued by Beyond Comics, a company owned by Greg Weik, and in the lawsuit alleged that Air Neos was a copy of his character, Ravidactyl. Greg was no fly-by-night grifter who drew this guy on a cocktail napkin to make a few bucks. No, he's an industry vet working on books like Spawn. And Ravidactyl is his own personal creation that he's been angling to make a thing for some time now. In order to do that, he put up a presence at places like Comic-Cons in San Diego, which were events also attended by Konami, with Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically. He cited interviews where Kazuki Takahashi claimed that the hero monsters were based on American comic books, and filed a cease and desist to Konami asking them to stop using Air Neos. Konami said nothing because they ignored it, so Beyond Comics took Konami to court. As Japanese companies are usually extremely hesitant to get into a legal battle, Konami decided to settle out of court for an unspecified settlement, though one of the assumed clauses was a complete discontinuation of Air Neos in anything ever. Do I have an opinion on this case? Obviously, of course I have my opinions. But a lot of people want to opt for the easy choice of saying there was one right party and one wrong party, black hat, white hat style. I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. Is Ravidactyl the most original character of all time, and does it have the reach that Greg wants it to? I'd say no. Does he still have the right to argue that this character lifts too heavily from his own? Also yes. Whatever opinion I do have, all it's gonna do is either affirm or challenge your own, so it's not like it really matters. All I ask is that if anybody feels like going on a witch hunt to attack Greg for ruining GX card collecting, he's among the people who wants Air Neos back. The real winners here, though, are the community finally having an answer for why Air Neos was unpersoned. And it's funny to think that Ravidactyl has existed for years, and nobody ever drew the connection between the two until the court documents were found. I guess that market confusion wasn't going to be a problem after all. Cards for real-life events. With how popular Yu-Gi-Oh! Is in Japan, it's not surprising to find out that it's been used for plenty of promotions for new products or events. A common crossover you'll see is Yu-Gi-Oh! Co-promoting with different food companies, like in 2023 when they released promotional cards only available at the chain restaurant Coco's. This was a line of alternate artwork for the 3 ace monsters of both the original 3 Yu-Gi-Oh! Series and Rush Duel, with Dark Magician, Neos, and Stardust getting the treatment, alongside Seven Roads Magician, Dragios, and Prima Gitarna. The promotion was so popular, it would be replicated several more times, expanding both to the later 3 original series and Go Rush once that started airing. In the second wave, they even began printing cards exclusive to the restaurant, like Steam Knight Hamburg, Steam Knight Bull Launcher, and Kokosh, the Spellcaster of Happiness. God help us if Steam Knight ever becomes meta and we have to start binge eating at Coco restaurants. Sticking to the original cards and food, the potato chip brand Calbee ran a promotion in Japan where buying a bag of chips would earn you a free pack. In the pack would be either some nostalgia cards from the anime, or if you were lucky, one of 3 promo cards exclusive to the chip bag. You could get either Potato and Chips, Soul Unseal, or Farm Delivery. These were 3 cards following a pair of couch potatoes eating chips until eventually being sent off to a Calbee's factory. What's funny is that unlike the Steam Knight cards, they included a spell and trap, meaning that these are mechanically unique cards that were only obtainable in potato chip bags. I'm assembling the strongest deck of all time, and I'm only going to 7-Eleven to do it. Speaking of which, 7-Eleven also did a promotion featuring Yu-Gi-Oh! Card packs, with these packs fetching you an exclusive alt art of a few nostalgia monsters based on their appearance from the Duel Arena online game. It's not too noteworthy, outside of chibi artwork that was given to dozens of monsters, from Insect Queen to Bujinji Susano to Apacli Fort Towers. This artwork has been beloved for years, so seeing Konami release it officially on cards is cool, especially since we'll be getting it soon enough. Another slightly less slushy exhibit that had Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards was the 2023 Dinosaur Expo in Tokyo, where with the purchase of 2,000 yen or more in merchandise, you could get a 2-card pack featuring a Rush Duel and standard Yu-Gi-Oh! Version of the dinosaur monster Mega Plunder. Another functionally unique card is the TV Tokyo promo card, Na. This features the mascot of TV Tokyo, Na, and a big old picture of Yuma on the front, because f*** what I said about them not putting characters on card art. You could win this card by actually going to the TV Tokyo Festival and playing games. Either speed matching or a shooting gallery game could net you worse Rush Recklessly. On the TCG side of things, there's very few examples of anything like this happening, with maybe the closest one being the McDonald's promo cards. But in one example too silly not to include, we have the Adidas Dark Magician. This was a special copy of Dark Magician that was exclusive to when you bought the Adidas crossover Yu-Gi-Oh! Sneakers. And where a stamp like the 25th anniversary stamp would have gone, instead there's the Adidas logo. The pinnacle of the real-life event cards, though, does come from America, with the 2007 World Championship exclusive Get Your Game On. This was a card distributed at the event with the effect to double the attack of all heroes and Neospatians you control, but only if you were present at the 2007 Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading Card Game World Championship. This card has so many weird little quirks about it. It has the text in the lower corner specifying that it's illegal, really bland and weird artwork with just the logo for the event trapped in Silent Hill. It's got a thank you message on the back, the only time-sensitive effect in the game, a very quirky card that commands a very serious price tag. Around $300 on the low end for one of these things, and if you get it, unless you were present at the championship, you can't even use it! 3 Dinosmasher's Fury. Structure decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Went through an incredible change as the game progressed. At the beginning of the game's lifespan, structure decks might have one good card and some decent reprints, but once we get into the cycle that we're in now, it became abysmal. In the beginning, structure decks were all themed around different types and attributes. You'd have the Dragon structure deck, the Zombie structure deck, the Fire structure deck, the Water structure deck, the Winged Beast structure deck, the Rock structure deck. All would come out, all would contain total garbage. Some of these structure decks, like the Winged Beast and Rock ones, are infamous for being some of the worst value you could get in terms of product. No good cards, and the ones that debuted were worthless. The Rock structure deck is where one of the worst cards of all time, Canyon, debuted. This card deals double damage taken when a monster attacks into a defense position monster. You know what's gonna stop anybody from attacking your face downs? If you tell them they'll take double damage! There would be some hits in the time in between, like the Caius structure deck, Zombie World, and Machina Madness, but then you would have flops like the Geargia structure deck, which took a tiered meta strategy, gave it a structure deck's worth of support, and then added 0 good new cards. It wasn't until the Pendulum era that structure decks finally got a change in philosophy, now being more geared towards meta play instead of casual play, and introducing tournament-ready decks playable out of the box. This started with a remake of the Monarch structure deck that put the deck back on the map, and after that, remakes of structure decks would begin shaking up the meta. Felgrand and the Kaiba structures would get remakes, both of which impacted the game for years to come, and following those would be the Ancient Gear structure deck, but then after that was perhaps the best structure deck Yu-Gi-Oh's ever released, a remake of the classic dinosaur structure deck, Dinosmasher's Fury. This deck took a decade of strong but disparate dinosaur support and connected it all with 5 new cards, and an additional support card in the following pack. Petite Pteranodon opened a massive pool of dinosaurs to summon from deck off the simple destruction of the baby. Soul-Eating Oviraptor was a Stratos for the entire dinosaur type, as well as a super efficient baby popper. Miscellaneousaurus was a bridge into any dino you wanted if you had dinos to banish, as well as protecting your entire field at the cost of a discard. Lost World was a field spell that could pop baby dinos from the deck to protect the ones you had on field, stop targeting, and sap your opponent's attack points. The main event, though, was Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, an easy-to-summon, massive attacker who could flip everything your opponent had face down, and then destroy it, dealing a flat 1,000 damage each time it did. UCT has gone down as one of the most iconic boss monsters of all time, and as soon as dinos become relevant again, people have to play around him. The power of Dinosmasher's Fury was so evident to the player base that when new players asked how to get into the game, the most common answer was to simply tell them, buy 3 Dinosmasher's Fury. That's all they needed. The deck had enough staples, the monsters in it were so good, add in Misk, who was the Larry-come-lately in the following pack, and you'd have a deck that could hang with the best of them. In fact, Dino was so good that it hung on for years. We're talking well into COVID during some of the worst formats Yu-Gi-Oh's ever had. People just decided to see if Dino was still good, and it was! It was really good! It was so good, Konami lent into it and printed a new scrap card, who was a dino who supported dinos more than it supported scraps. Dinosmasher's Fury was so influential that it's kind of broken dino support ever since. We haven't gotten a dedicated dino deck since Dino Wrestlers, and because of that, Dinosaur the type has essentially become Dinosaur the archetype, with new dinosaur support supporting the game plan of popping babies to summon out massive dinos. This is reflected in one of the worst archetypes of all time, Transcendosaurus. This deck does nothing, because this deck is not intended to do anything. This is not a deck. This deck is simply support for the wider dino strategy, with nothing it can do on its own. 3 Dinosmasher's Fury was so influential that this one meme spawned other memes off of it, like asking, "Have you read Misk?" in response to people being confounded by its effect to protect monsters. The funniest part of Miscellaneousaurus's effect to protect all your monsters is that if you discard Miscellaneousaurus, your field is immune from Nibiru. Guys, the dinosaurs found out how to fight back against the meteor. Pop the Baby is a joke with layers. Initially just a funny way to refer to destroying Baby Cerosaurus and Petite Pteranodon to gain their effects, except those jokes got used so much that people eventually used Pop the Baby ironically, to bluntly joke about how unfunny the joke was. I don't think we'll ever see a structure deck again that has as much value, staying power, and influence as Dinosmasher's Fury. Unless they remake the Geargia one and actually unprint the good Geargias. DDD Spreadsheet. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is complicated, but does it get Excel complicated? One of the biggest knocks against Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that it's hard to learn. Any deck can be a challenge to pilot when it comes to keeping track of what would be best in the moment to beat your opponent, accounting for what they have, what they could have, if they have graveyard effects or something in hand, what you have and how you can use it, what locks you've put yourself under, what locks your opponents put you under, what you can still do if you get negated. A lot of it is hard, and some decks try to make it even harder. Difficult decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Put the skill that the player accrues to a new level, requiring a higher mental tax than anything else and pushing you to your limits. And no deck has ever done that, like Different Dimension Demons, or DDDs. Used by Reiji in the Arc 5 manga and anime, DDDs are a mishmashing of different mythical beasts, demons, and kinda just guys in armor, with 2 different themes. The Pendulum Monsters are based on famous philosophers, while the larger bosses are named after historical heroes and office positions. Okay, this is only gonna make sense in Japanese, but a bunch of these monsters use their kanji to double as puns for office positions. So Doom King Armageddon uses the kanjis Shi, E, and O. Shi-E-O. CEO. Doom King is the CEO. It doesn't matter to the topic, but it matters to me. Without it, I have nothing. Upon its initial release, DDD was clearly on a different level to what Yu-Gi-Oh! Was used to. It could use all 3 of the major summoning mechanics and pendulum summoning, pivoting between the different low levels to make whatever monster you needed for the current situation. The trade-off to this versatility is that the deck is hard as f*** to play. Knowing what's possible with whatever combination of DDs and Dark Gates you get is integral to know how to carry out a turn, and knowing what to do if you're stopped from your original plan is just as important. DDD had the capability to do all of this. It was up to the player who had to figure out how to make it all work. It was so hard, in fact, it necessitated the creation of a resource, the DDD Spreadsheet. What this is a spreadsheet in Excel that will give you every possible combination of starter, extender, and spell card you could use, what they could be used for, what their best use was, and what to do if they were negated. This spreadsheet is held up as one of the key reasons DDD was so difficult. Look at how much information you need to play the deck. It's one of the hardest decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! You need to be a genius to play the best deck. This sorta runs against the reality, though, that while the hypothetical version of DDD would be good, and it certainly was in Japan, where all of its cards were released in the right order, that never happened in America, thanks to the release order leaving out key cards at the worst possible times. DDD got to be at full power for about a week, before Zoodiac packed and smoked it like high school weed. It gives DDD this strange energy of deck that could have been good, but now looks kind of silly with all of this information and so few results. In fact, I'd say that more recent DDD support kind of hurts the deck's big brain perception. Gilgamesh, a DDD Link monster that sets 2 pendulum scales from deck immediately, is so strong you want to get to him as fast as possible. And DDD has restructured itself around playing to Gilgamesh as quickly as it can. It gives a deck that at one point was vaunted for its versatility a choke point so tight that it leaves you with nothing if it's stopped. At time of writing, new DDD support was just announced, so I'd be happy to be proven wrong, but the legend of the DDD Spreadsheet has overshadowed the reality that the deck never converted into any real success. As well, at time of writing, there's a huge community discussion on spreadsheets, specifically paid spreadsheets, and how, is it a scam if pro players intentionally withhold or put out bum information so they can retain an edge over people who try to follow the spreadsheet? Should the spreadsheet be the be-all end-all, or should it be a cheat sheet to learn the deck's basics and then learn more on your own? All I know is that if it means I have to sign up for Microsoft Office, I'm not using it. The Joey 9. You have no idea how many cards you don't know about. Yu-Gi-Oh! In the US and other regions started almost 3 years after the game began in Japan, meaning there was 3 years worth of cards left over that needed to be imported to America. What cards were being released between the original Series 1 booster pack and America's Legend of the Blue Eyes White Dragon? Just a bunch of normal monsters. You might think that early Yu-Gi-Oh! Packs contain nothing but normals, and they do, but as it turns out, the 5 effect monsters we got in Legend of the Blue Eyes White Dragon are spoiling us compared to what they got in the OCG. It took until Volume 3 for the first monster that did something, and it would take a further 2 volumes before we'd get ones that didn't need to be flipped up. In America, by contrast, we'd have a decent amount of monsters by the second set, Metal Raiders. As a result, the TCG felt it was unnecessary to print every single level 3 vanilla with 600 attack and defense, leaving nearly 100 normal monsters without ever getting an official English translation. Some of these monsters would find their way to America whenever nostalgia sets were reprinted or classic card bundles were released, but their best chance to get printed in English was through the legendary collection boxes. These were big boxes of packs and pre-constructed decks that were themed around arcs and duelists, and would come with stuff like a hard playmat, dice, counters, coins, and other stuff. These were, and still are, great gifts for people who are getting into the game, or Yu-Gi boomers who just want to look at a picture of Yu-Gi and nod in approval. Where we find our subject for this topic, though, is in the 4th legendary collection, Joey's World, released in 2013. The box was themed after Joey Wheeler and included a bunch of cards iconic to him, like Red Eye's Black Dragon, Jinzo, and Guilford the Lightning. What it included as well were packs with a 200 card deep card pool, for Joey and duelists he famously dueled, like Rex, Mai, Merrick, and Bandit Keith. Seeing as these packs were mostly for nostalgia, they were filled with a lot of normal monsters and classic cards who had seen their best days, or never had best days at all. This would include porting in classic cards who had never seen a printing before, like some of Rex's dinosaurs, Bones' zombies, Keith's machines, and a set of 8 normal monsters that Joey used throughout the original manga and anime. These seemed like normal reprints, but then you read the flavor text. This stone critter's got rock-hard foy. That gives him some really good defense. This big old guy with a big old eye shoots a nasty ray beam right at ya. Feel the strength of this sword-swinging samurai from the Far East. These 8 plus 1 more would make up the Joey 9, a series of normal monsters who had their flavor text written by Joey Wheeler himself. See, Katsuyori Jonoichi, as Joey is known in Japan, speaks in a very rough, informal dialect, not using honorific titles and using informal versions of words that give him a rude accent. This is where localization actually matters, because translating that manner of speech to English comes off as something like a gruff New Yorker, which led to him getting a Brooklyn accent, one of the most famous dub changes 4Kids ever made. While it didn't quite work with Sanji in the One Piece dub, this would go on to become one of their most beloved changes. Brooklyn Joey is a change almost nobody draws real issue with, mostly just down to people saying it's weird that he's the only one with an accent, and he lives in Japan. Since they'd be importing these 8 cards that nobody gave a f about, the TCG department decided to have some fun and translate the cards in a Brooklyn accent. This isn't even unprecedented, as another Joey card, Alligator Sword, got this treatment years before these cards did. This is like if the fur hire joke didn't go over like a lead balloon. In fact, one of these cards is much more interesting with its flavor text, and to talk about it, I have to spoil a very small bit of a later entry: abridged references in official material. For the flavor text of Anthrosaurus, they reference Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged series. This man-like dinosaur got a high IQ, even though he's lacking in the strength department. Kinda like yous, if you had a high IQ. Yeah! That "nyeh" is a reference to a verbal tick of Joey's from the Abridged series, which is where a lot of the New York Joey jokes originate from. Do this again, but with Zeus. How are you not prepared for mine yet? What is the most hated card in Yu-Gi-Oh! History? It's a question that largely depends on the player you ask, as one's experiences with the game shapes how they see the card pool and what opinions they have on it. A popular answer would be Max C, a card that often dumbs down games to having Max C, playing it, seeing if your opponent has the answer, and then winning on the spot if they don't. Some people believe that Max C is used to keep combo decks in check, and these people are sweet, innocent, and stupid. Cards that appear in the meta for long stretches of time, like Crystron Halki Fibrax, lead to the game feeling like it never really advances past a certain point, and makes it hard to tell when certain formats even end. Heck, a genre of cards I personally hate are bottlenose cards. Cards that are so strong, they warp a deck around themselves to the point they have no game plan should that card fail to resolve. I believe Gladiator Beast would be a much more fun deck without Tamer Editor in it. And I know that can work, since Infernoble Knights got better once they stopped gunning to play Isolde every single game. However, one class of card sits above all the others in terms of hatred: Floodgates. Floodgates are, as the name implies, a class of card meant to inhibit your opponent somehow. Floodgates stop some aspect of the game from occurring properly, and will really screw over a player if it's allowed to go off. Cards as simple as Swords of Revealing Light might be considered a floodgate, but if you want the really bad ones, you have cards like Skill Drain or Anti-Spell Fragrance. Cards that just stop an entire superclass of card from even working. Jinzo doesn't count because he has Riz. Above all other floodgates, though, over Secret Village of the Spellcasters, over Inspector Border, over Dimension Shifter, there's Mystic Mine. Released in Darkness Neostorm in 2019, Mystic Mine's effect reads simple. The player with more monsters on the field can't activate monster effects or attack. And if you control the same amount of cards, this card is destroyed. This is one of the strongest floodgates of all time. A full field lockdown and attack stopper is a lot to put on one card, which should naturally be balanced by two facts. It can destroy itself, and it's a spell card, meaning other spells can destroy it. Both of these problems are rendered kind of moot. The first one, its self-destruction effect, didn't affect the player using it if mine was used reactively. If your opponent builds a huge board of monsters, all you gotta do is get them to waste their spell and trap negation, put down mine, and suddenly their whole field does nothing. Their huge dragons suddenly turn to stone since their effects don't work and they can't attack. And they have no way to reduce the amount of monsters they have to equal yours, since no matter how many times they link or synchro, they can never get down to 0. This also meant that the fact that Mystic Mine's effect was reciprocal, and you could potentially suffer the downsides, didn't matter, because you could always control how many monsters you had, whereas your opponent couldn't. But they can just drop a mystical space typhoon and pop the mine, right? Well, the problem there is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has kind of evolved away from that sort of interaction. Generic one-for-one cards like Mystical Space Typhoon or Cosmic Cyclone, these cards weren't played anymore since modern archetypes had in-archetype ways to do what they did. If Thunder Dragon wants to destroy spell cards, they'd make Titan or discard Thunderbird. If Orcus wanted to destroy them, they'd make Nightmare Phoenix. Cards that might work under other floodgates, but not mine. You could play spell card outs like Harpy's Feather Duster and Cosmic Cyclone, but what else in mine's formats were you preparing for with those cards? Not a lot of other heavy spell and trap decks were popular at the same time, except maybe Salamangrate? But even then, those options pretty much just beat mine. They did beat mine really well, like Into the Dirt well, but if you played those cards, you risked not having the answer to a much more common problem. This became the pattern Mystic Mine would inhabit for a long time. If you prepare for it, Mystic Mine is like a mosquito. If you don't, Mystic Mine is like a mosquito with malaria. We haven't really talked about how Mystic Mine does win the game, because it really doesn't do much. At the start, it was based around burn cards, though it eventually evolved into a deck-out strategy, or even using cards like Final Countdown to just sit there and wait for a win in 20 turns. This was a particular favorite of the most famous Mystic Mine pilot of all time, Jeff Leonard. Jeff Leonard's decision to have a kid nearly killed Yu-Gi-Oh! See, Jeff got into the game so that him and his son would have something to bond over. But Jeff hates combo decks. If he can, he'll do anything he can to play Stun or some variant of it. So Mystic Mine became his ace card. He would play it in addition to alt-win cards in order to win games with as little effort as he could realistically put forward. Now, this kicks ass. Jeff is one of the most beloved players in the game's history for being the nice dad who shows up and stuns you to hell. Anything mean I have to say about stun players, like their habit of sucking scum, does not apply to Jeff. He's the man. Luckily, the next format didn't really allow for mine, with the two best decks of Adamancipator and Eldritch both having in-archetype ways to demolish mine. For a few years, it slinked back into the shadows, stealing wins every once in a while, and casually reminding people that they hated the shit out of this unfun card. 2022, though, was when Mystic Mine was back. The format consisted of multiple monster-heavy decks in the form of Branded, Sword Soul, Dragon Link, Fluanderees, and alongside Sky Strikers, which had recently seen the return of some of their best cards, Mystic Mine had a home and proceeded to wreck shop. Mystic Mine secured win after win until eventually it was just in every deck. If your deck could play Mine, it played Mine. By YCS Rio, Mystic Mine won without even playing a monster card in their deck. It was all just burn cards, and to make sure the opponent couldn't have no monsters to destroy the mine, winner Zhao Paulo included Ojama Duo and Trio, forcing tokens onto his opponent so they couldn't play. From there, the firestorm to ban Mine was getting hotter than ever. It was a full-blown campaign, Mystic Mine trending on Twitter for days as people wanted to see this terrible card gone. That's when the man who innovated Striker Mine himself, prolific pro player Jesse Cotton, stepped in and dropped the infamous tweet. Okay guys, but with all due respect, how are you not prepared for Mine yet? He was correct. All that was needed to stop Mine was playing the outs. But it didn't stop this tweet from becoming a huge meme in the community. By the time of Tier 0, Mine had stopped seeing as much play due to Tier absolutely shitting on it. But that didn't mean some Tier builds wouldn't use it themselves. Finally, after 4 years of tormenting the player base, Mystic Mine was banned, and, with any luck, will never return. What made Mine such an unfun card to play against is that the gameplay it created sucks, flat out. The card created games that are at best go fish, asking your opponent if they have Cosmic Cyclone yet. At its worst, you'd be better off in a staring contest for all the effort you were putting forward. It's only challenged by Self-Destruct button as Yu-Gi-Oh's most toxic card, and may we never see anything like it again. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was supposed to be a horror manga. The original run of Yu-Gi-Oh's sources of inspiration are as varied as they are completely f***ing disparate. You had the obvious ones like gaming, Egyptian history, and American pop culture, but then you start looking deeper and find stuff like Yugi's clothes being inspired by bondage. No, seriously, Kazuki Takahashi cites a source of inspiration for Yugi's design as Edward Scissorhands, and after watching the movie, decided that instead of giving Yugi basic casual wear like a t-shirt, that he'd instead give him leather clothing. This was all a setup to try to get Little Karibo to make the song Leather Pants. The idea to make the hard light hologram projections for the monsters in Duelist Kingdom forward is specifically based on the hollow chess set scene from Star Wars, as Takahashi saw it as an interesting and cool way to let non-occult characters project their cards. As should be obvious from reading Season 0 material as well, horror was a huge influence on Yu-Gi-Oh! In its early phases. Many of the punishment game's outcomes dip into body horror, like having items emerge from under people's skin, Tetsuo the Iron Man style, or having them be attacked by monsters and burst into flames. Anytime Takahashi got to draw a really grotesque monster, you got a sense for how his style mixed both American and Japanese sensibilities. Both an absurd amount of detail with jagged and exaggerated angles that gave everything a dangerous feeling. It's an aspect of his work that is really on display in the early parts of Yu-Gi-Oh! There are also the more overt references, like the murder park of Death T and Chopman being a basic copy of Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Even when the series transitioned into more card game stuff, there was always an element of horror, like Bandit Keith's accidental suicide when Pegasus transformed his hand into a gun. With so much grisly imagery, it's unsurprising to find out the series was originally supposed to lean much more into it. In an interview for a volume release of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Kazuki Takahashi talked about the original plans for the series, and disclosed it was meant to be much closer to something like Death Note than what we got. Far more steeped in horror and mystery, rather than just card games. We even got to see a sketch of the original version of Yugi from this early version of the story. His design is a lot closer to Bones than the Yugi we know. It's interesting to think about how things could have gone if Takahashi saw his original vision through. With the illustrations we have, I'd have loved to have seen what a full-blown horror manga would have looked like from him. Kazuki Takahashi's favorite cards. A parent isn't supposed to play favorites, but with over 10,000 children, I think he's allowed to give a few preferential treatment. In the author's note from another Yu-Gi-Oh! Volume release in 2002, Kazuki Takahashi actually gave a top 10 of his favorite monsters from the series up to that point. In order, number 10 is Gaia the Fierce Knight, which he calls a pain to draw. Number 9 was Time Wizard, which he admits to treating more like a spell card than a monster. Number 8 was Exodia for being based on the myth of Osiris from Egyptian mythology. Number 7 was Dark Magician Girl, wonder why. Number 6 was Buster Blader, because he has taste and Buster Blader is cool as hell. Number 5 was... we'll save number 5 actually. Number 4 is Red Eyes, which he describes as being cool. Number 3 was Karibo, with his description asking what was up with that shifty look in his eyes. Wait, you don't know? Number 2 and 1 were the Dark Magician and Blue Eyes White Dragon, because even the creator acknowledged that Blue Eyes is cooler than Dark Magician. And that number 5 entry? I saved it for last because it seriously floored me when I heard his 5th favorite card was Panther Warrior. Yeah, the Joey card that needs a tribute to attack? That's his 5th favorite. He says it's because of the American comics influence, which I guess is from Conan or maybe Thundercats? Far be it from me to judge the man on his own work, but really, Panther Warrior? Treebound Hound.